Voice of college football here. Let's get week 9 underway on a Thursday night. Welcome in to our call-in show. We will be here for a few hours taking your comments and questions, of course, in the live chat, and your calls in just a few minutes here at the Voice of College Football. All right. What a weekend we've got in store. Games all over the place involving Texas, Baylor in particular in the Big 12, Oklahoma, Texas Tech. As we go to the SEC, we've got Georgia and Florida going at it, but all eyes on the Big 10. Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan, Michigan State, Ohio State, Penn State, the three big games that are titanic in the Big 10 toward a championship. Again, welcome in here to the Voice of College Football. Let me get you set up with everything that we've got before we start to dive into some of the topics that are hitting the college football scene tonight. One particular topic I'm going to address would be the bowl season group, the bowl officials who are challenging the college football playoff sites. We will look into that. That is the topic for tonight. You can call about anything. So I'm going to be taking calls in a few minutes. If you would like to call, certainly let me know, because otherwise I've yet to fire up the phone lines, and I'll just be talking week 9, which we've got a couple games tonight, a couple games on Friday, but of course the big boys get going on a Saturday, although we do have depending on your rankings preference. If you still follow the AP and the coaches poll, there is a ranked team at Coastal Carolina, despite a pretty dismal resume. They are still ranked by somebody. They are in play tonight. So welcome in, everyone. Great to see everyone here at the Voice of College Football. Want to remind everyone of a number of things here. So whether you're watching live or you're watching the replay, shop Amazon. You're going to do it anyway. That's all there is to it. I know there is almost nothing that I say during these shows that I know to be true, 100% guaranteed, factual. If it's not already happened. Those things that have already happened, yes, I actually know a number of things that have already taken place. But the thing that I am dead set knowing that will happen, in addition to death and taxes, is that you will shop on Amazon. Not every one of you, but most of you will shop on Amazon. That's all there is to it. You're Americans, you're going to shop on Amazon. Half of America shops on Amazon every month. That's just let that sink in. 160 or 70 million people shopping on Amazon every month. So I'm talking to people that are shopping on Amazon every month. Please use the link in the description section of any of the videos. Grab that link, put it somewhere where you will remember it. And then when you're ready to shop, you grab that link, you use that link. That's all you got to do. You're going to use a link to go into Amazon anyway. If you use the link that we provide, you help us build the channel, and you do exactly the same thing you would do otherwise. You still look for the same products. You buy whatever you want. I don't care. Doesn't matter. Buy what you want. It's not going to cost you an extra penny. Doesn't change the shopping experience online. You just grab the link that we provide in the description section of any of the videos. Go to any of the videos, grab the link in the description section. Amazon, capitals. There's a link right next to it. Grab that link, put it somewhere where you will remember it. I'm going to talk about this incessantly, especially through Christmas. So get used to it. I'm going to just pound it away. Amazon, Amazon link, Amazon link, Amazon link, Voice of College Football. Also, we're on Patreon. I went 10-6 against the spread last week. 95-64. Overall, I believe is the record. 95-64 against the spread. 119. That's 119 victories and 41 losses against the money line. That's 3-1. That's 75% against the money line. I'm usually much better than that. So sorry for the down year against the money line. About 75%. Yeah, 120-40 would be 3-1, 75%. So I'm at 119-41, about 74+%. Usually around 80% against the money line. So join us on Patreon. Voice of College Football right there. Just go to Patreon, search Mark Rogers TV, or again, you can go to the link in the description section. We provide the link down there to Patreon. You get Steve Merrill's Under the Radar selection of the week, which involved a Mountain West game this week. His Under the Radar pick of the week. Steve Merrill joins us from Wager Talk and from Pro Sports Info. And so join us on Patreon. And I am cooking up some good things to take us into the off season on Patreon. Maybe a cooking show. I don't know. All right. You can write for us. We are proud. I am so proud and happy. Those would be the two best adjectives to use. Proud and happy to announce our first article posted to the Voice of College Football. voiceofcollegefootball.com. No the this time. It's always the Voice of College Football, but this time it's just voiceofcollegefootball.com. voiceofcollegefootball.com. And I provided the link on the community page. Keith Eichholz is our first writer. He has posted our first article on voiceofcollegefootball.com. So if you would like to write for us, you can do so. Go to voiceofcollegefootball.com. Voiceofcollegefootball.com. Go to the top of the screen. It says write for us. Click on that. Doesn't mean you got to crank out articles every day or anything crazy. You'll be in contact with me. We'll take it from there. And of course, folks, sponsor the Voice of College Football. If you yourself own a business, you could benefit from sponsoring the Voice of College Football. We've got 80,000 total subs. We've got 30,000 here on the main channel. We reach over 500,000 views per month. What a bargain. So you can sponsor here at the Voice of College Football. If you have any connections to any sponsors, please let me know. Hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Also, keep in mind that we've got post-game shows all over the place this Saturday. Post-game shows on our many team channels this Saturday. We are going crazy this Saturday, following Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State, Iowa, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Texas, Baylor. Got post-game shows for all these. Florida, Georgia. Clemson, Florida State, of course, post-game. Miami, Pitt, post-game. Post-game all over the place. Who else is playing that we've got post-game for this weekend? Number of teams in the SEC, as we typically do. Super Chat's available. You can support us there. Definitely hit that like button. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. Just search Mark Rogers TV. All right. I'm going to hit the comments real quick. And then I'm going to dive into this article that was posted by Heather Dinich, because the College Football Playoff Committee is meeting in Dallas this Wednesday and Thursday. So the committee that put together this 12-team proposal that we heard about so much just prior to this season, back in, July and August, they're going to be meeting in Dallas this week. And then we'll hear more about their plans. But the bowl officials have intercepted this meeting, in a sense, by wanting to get out ahead of the curve to say, hey, we need to be included in this. So we're going to run through this article, and I'm going to let you know what I think about all this. So should bowl sites and bowl games be used for the playoff or not? That's what it comes down to. Should bowl games, meaning pick your favorite bowl, the Outback Bowl, should that be part of the playoff process? The Outback Bowl and the location of the Outback Bowl. So should we call one of the playoff games the Outback Bowl? It's similar to what we got right now. The Orange Bowl could be a semifinal game, and it's a college football playoff game, but it's also the Orange Bowl. And I dug up some numbers concerning the ESPN Football Power Index that I may track from now till the end of the season. We're going to see what your response is, and I may be tracking these numbers the rest of the season, because the ESPN Football Power Index is brought up from time to time, and I've always stated when it's brought up to say, I don't know how accurate it is. Just because the FPI says that Pitt's a 58% probability to beat Clemson, who is 42%. Big deal. Does that mean anything to me? I need to see when somebody says, so when I predict the football games, for example, I tell you, I went 10-6 against the spread last week, and I went 12-3 straight up. So you know, okay, this is what Mark's picks mean. This is how good they are or not good they are. This is the track record. 95-64 against the spread this year, 119-41 against the money line. Okay, so now he's going to give us his predictions, and this is what he's done this year. And he's gone 80% and 60% against the spread for 40 years. So, okay, we know what that means. When I see a ESPN Football Power Index number, that means nothing to me. They need to state how accurate they are, or somebody needs to keep track. Maybe I'll be that guy to keep track. So I looked at last week's numbers. I looked at the numbers at kickoff versus the final results. All right, let's take it from the top. Christopher's in here right out of the gate. Christopher may have trick-or-treaters in the neighborhood tonight. I don't know when they're trick-or-treating around here because obviously Halloween is on Sunday. So when I was growing up, we would trick-or-treat at night. Then I know that became kind of a faux pas that nobody trick-or-treated at night because it wasn't that safe in certain places. So then they backed it off to afternoon. And of course, if Halloween fell on a weeknight or not the best time, that they would move it to, no, we would always go on a weeknight. Didn't really matter, but we're looking at Sunday as Halloween. I know a lot of people are going to party on Saturday or Friday. Christopher's got a ton of comments about Halloween candy and homework. And Mike 3883 is here. Like that. Good to see you, Mike. Good to see you, Christopher. Good to see you, the real MVP. Great games this week. Absolutely. Auburn, Ole Miss. Also. Double X buckets for life. Likes Sparty to beat Michigan. Good day, Tennille. Hope you have a better attitude. Okay. We had attitude problems apparently yesterday. Not use Dexter. Change the top chat to the live chat. You talking to me? You just talking to somebody else? Okay. Nebraska, Purdue. Hummus Heroes here. Good to see you. Voice of the Big Ten and college football. Well, we'll stay with college football. That way we encapsulate the Big Ten, Will. So we'll stay with college football, but voice of the Big Ten, sure. Coastal Carolina 6-1, yes. That is a bad schedule they've played. Hummus Hero is asking if Coastal Carolina is the worst strength of schedule in the country. They may. All right, the Rod Farva. Mark, thoughts on the 18.5-point spread in the Ohio State-Penn State game? Well, if I would say it's too high or too low, then you would assume that meant that I was picking a certain way. I think it's pretty fair. I don't know how much that line's been affected by Sean Clifford's injury, has been affected by injuries on the Penn State defense, affected by Penn State's play last week against Illinois. Like if this game had been played post or pre-Iowa, Ohio State, Penn State would have played pre-Iowa game for Penn State. Maybe it's a touchdown. I don't know. So I will be making a prediction, of course, as we get toward the weekend. Hair Trigger, if you're telling me that you used Amazon a couple times this year and use the link, then thumbs up. If you didn't use the link, please do the next time that you jump on Amazon. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Yes, Florida, you would think, is going to be 4-4. Florida is only a 14-point underdog. So Georgia's beaten Arkansas by 37. They beat Kentucky by 16, I believe. Was that a 30-14 game? I believe. Who else have they played that's good? Kentucky and Arkansas. They beat Auburn by 24. 14-point favorite against Florida. I thought it was going to be larger. What if Florida actually wins? Georgia will eventually choke. (30-13). Yes, Kentucky, Georgia. 30-13. Justin Burr's here. Good to see you. Go Bucks. We'll be rooting for Michigan so they stay higher ranked when Ohio State beats them. Ben's here. Mark's here. D-Rock Irish, good to see you. He's going to call this Knockout Saturday. D-Rock, we'll leave that up to you. That can be your pet term for this Saturday. We'll stay with week 9. See several elimination games for conference championship games, especially in the Big Ten. Yes. Not necessarily elimination games, but in which the team is going to take a large step toward getting there. Okay. Let's look at this article. Let's look at this article dealing with the bowl sites versus the playoffs. Okay. This again posted by Heather Dinich of ESPN. Bowl season executives, which unless that's a formal term, bowl season executives, which the way it's written, it appears as though it is. I've never heard that of that group, bowl season executives. I know that each bowl has bowl officials. So bowl season executives who oversee the operation of 43 postseason bowl games sent a letter this week to hundreds of leaders in college football, asking that any future college football playoff games and potential expansion be held at bowl sites instead of on campus, according to a copy of the letter obtained Thursday by ESPN. So basically what Heather is reporting here is that they sent a letter to say, we want playoff games to be bowl games so we can maintain the bowl system and the playoff games can become bowl games, and therefore we maintain and, if anything, enhance the value and the attractiveness of the bowls. Because if you're the Outback Bowl, I picked on the Outback Bowl before, I will again. Nothing to do with the Outback Bowl in particular. I'm just using this as an example. If you're the Outback Bowl, you are currently an SEC versus Big Ten game. That's pretty attractive. It's pretty good ball game, pretty good matchup. Probably 7th, 8th, 9th on the list of bowl games on that second tier. And you've got like a third place SEC team against a third place Big Ten team. But suddenly you're a playoff game. Well, the value of your game has just skyrocketed. So, of course, they want this. Of course, bowl officials want to be included in the playoff. So the letter was sent in anticipation of the College Football Playoff Management Committee's in-person meetings in Dallas Wednesday and Thursday. Going to meet in person. That's good to hear. No Zoom calls. Going to actually meet in person. So the College Football Playoff Management Committee is meeting this week in Dallas to continue discussions about possibly expanding the playoff beyond the current 4 teams. Apparently, this is the first time this these bowl officials have weighed in publicly about the way this format should look. Okay. Quote, we believe any plan for an expanded playoff should include all playoff games being played within the traditional bowl structure, not the home site of one of the participating teams. So this is completely self-serving, of course. The bowls would provide, and this is the case they're making, a neutral, competitively fair setting for these games as they have throughout their history. To exclude bowl games from any round of an expanded playoff would be harmful to the bowl season. Yes, obviously it would be harmful to the bowl season because your games would be even more irrelevant in comparison to the other games going on. Would be harmful to individual bowls and their host communities and postseason college football in general. Okay, that statement makes total sense because it's all self-serving. Yes, playoffs without bowl designation hurts the bowl season. Absolutely, it hurts the bowls individually and it hurts bowl season. The one thing that he stated there that's not accurate is that it would be harmful to postseason college football in general. That's not the case. Wrong. The management committee, which consists of 10 FBS commissioners, so it's the 10 conference commissioners, plus Notre Dame athletic director Jack Swarbrick. I never did understand that compilation of the committee, that conference commissioners, so 14 Big Ten teams, 14 SEC, 14 ACC, 10 Big 12, 12, etc., in each conference are represented by one conference commissioner, but Notre Dame's represented on its own. Okay. These committee members, these commissioners, and Swarbrick have been focused on the 12-team format. They have yet to reach a consensus, and they plan to present to the College Football Playoff Board of Managers for a vote. The 12-team model currently under consideration would include the 6 highest-ranked conference champions plus the next highest-ranked teams. The 4 highest-ranked conference champions would receive first-round byes, while the other 8 teams would play in the first round on campus of the higher seed. So here's the problem. If you're going to have a 12-team playoff, you want incentive going into the playoff. An incentive would be not just to make the playoff, but for teams like Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, teams that are going to make the playoff every year, is to play at home. Therefore, you have to play well. If these games are going to be in bowl games and on bowl sites, there's going to be less incentive to win and to gain home field advantage because there will not be home field advantage. So what's the advantage to being to reach the 5-12 game instead of the 8-9 game? Well, theoretically, your opponent's going to be a little bit worse, but it's more about home field advantage. I don't like this. I don't like the bowls being part of the playoff. I think it's stupid right now. If you grew up with the bowl games meant something, partially because there was a regional feel. There was an environment, there was a regional feel to the bowl game. And the conferences that were invited to those bowl games, they also brought a regional feel to them. The Cotton Bowl being connected to the Southwest Conference made sense, and it had a regional feel, a regional vibe. Okay, the Cotton Bowl didn't have the Big Ten champion host the Cotton Bowl because there's no connection there. So now we currently have playoff games that have bowl names. They have bowl affiliation. I find it extremely dumb, stupid. Put any term of deficiency on that you want and attach it to it, because the Sugar Bowl is not the Sugar Bowl. It's in the college football playoff. It's a playoff game. Big deal. They play in the Sugar Bowl Stadium, which there is no Sugar Bowl Stadium anymore anyway. That used to be Tulane Stadium. It used to be the Sugar Bowl. It's the Superdome in New Orleans. There was no Sugar Bowl stadium. The Orange Bowl stadium gone, so they play somewhere else. They play at Hard Rock Stadium. They just happen to be in. So we've even gotten rid of the actual stadiums, which at one point were the host of the bowl game. The Gator Bowl, the Orange Bowl, the Cotton Bowl. The Cotton Bowl doesn't even host the Cotton Bowl anymore. The Cotton Bowl's still there, but it does not host the Cotton Bowl. The Cotton Bowl's basically gone. Cotton Bowl's played for other games, but does not host the Cotton Bowl. How stupid is that? The Rose Bowl would be the exception. So the Rose Bowl still very much in play, and of course, a site for college football and site of the Rose Bowl. But when you're playing, but the Rose Bowl is a game that has pitted the Pac-12 champion against the Big Ten champion for decades. So as soon as it becomes a college football playoff game, and like last year, pits Alabama against Notre Dame in a playoff game, to me, it's no longer the Rose Bowl. And especially last year, they didn't even play it in Pasadena. They played it in Dallas. This letter by the bowl officials was sent to 403 people, 131 presidents and chancellors and athletic directors, head coaches, FBS commissioners. In addition to reminding them of the important role bowl season has played in the history of the sport, I totally agree. Continue bowl season outside of the playoff. The letter was sent to ask that as the future of the sport continues to be contemplated, bowl season has a seat at the table for the conversations. So basically, if you're a bowl official and you have a bowl game and it's the Citrus Bowl, you understand that your game's going to be more viable. You're going to make more money. There's going to be more interest if you're within the playoff structure. If you're no longer within the playoff structure, then your game's going to be less attractive. So it's just a self-preservation move. And the commissioners are going to make the final decisions, apparently. That makes sense. The guy that wrote the letter, or at least was the spokesman for the bowl officials, says, however, we look at postseason college football as having two components, the playoff component and bowl season. Well, if you just stated that, then your request makes no sense because you want them to be intertwined. They're both equally important, and they really work together a lot of ways. Well, they're not equally important in regards to the competition and the championship. They're not. So we think we can add a lot of value to the conversation and maybe come up with solutions that the commissioners would not have contemplated or maybe would have never thought that the bowl system would handle. Okay. What the bowl system can't get around is that they're going to have neutral site games. They're not going to be able to accommodate on campus, obviously, as a bowl game. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. Let's see what else we've got. Again, if you'd like to sponsor Mark Rogers TV, the Voice of College Football, please let me know. Hit me up on Gmail at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Also shop Amazon using the link in the description section. D-Rock, good to see you. Yes, self-preservation. It doesn't add to the playoffs in my estimation. Again, when we have a postseason in which the Rose Bowl is hosting a college football playoff semifinal, which features Alabama and Florida State, well, that to me is not the Rose Bowl, just because they're playing in the Rose Bowl. And certainly, if it's the Orange Bowl, and it's not even played in the Orange Bowl, it's played at Hard Rock Stadium, and it's in the college football playoff, and the two teams have no connection to the Orange Bowl or the the conference affiliation with the Orange Bowl, then it ceases to be the Orange Bowl. Christopher continues to tell us that there is no need for a playoff. Cheryl. Hey, Cheryl. Good to see you. Thumbs up, everyone. Like button. Jay, go Dogs. I have to think that everybody's responding about the playoffs, and they're responding to Christopher's comments about their not being a necessity for the playoffs. Go Bucks wants to keep the playoffs at 4. D-Rock Irish is asking, do you expect a huge turnout for a team who is seeded 5 and perhaps has fans travel 4 times to hit the championship game? I think not. That's a good point. And that's been a point that I've hit on previously, but was not thinking about currently, is that you enter this playoff, this 12-team playoff, and let's say you're the 5 seed. So you're playing the 12 seed. Well, to win the championship, you're going to have to play in 3 games. Are your fans going to travel over and over and over? You're expecting fan bases to travel 3 times and possibly 4 times, right? Because if you play in the first round of a 12-team playoff, there are going to be 4 byes. There's going to be the 8 teams. So you're basically playing, yes, you're going to play that game. That's going to narrow the field to 8. Then you're going to play that game that narrows it to 4. You're going to play that game. Then you can play the championship game. So you may play 4 games. You're either going to play 3 games total to get to the championship game, or you're going to play 4 total games, including the championship game, 3 or 4 games. You're going to ask fan bases to travel 3 times or 4 times to neutral sites. That's another issue in all this. What fans, you're going to have fans trying to determine, okay, I really don't have a whole lot of trust in my team, and so I want to see them play in a playoff game. They hardly ever would make the playoffs. Let's say Arkansas gets in, and their fans are thinking, I don't know when we're going to make the playoffs again, so let's travel this first game, and we'll go to this bowl game. But then they win, and then you obviously, there's more excitement, anticipation, more importance to the final game, the championship game, and next the semifinal game, that fans will be more attracted to going to those games. So you almost have to have an on-campus game to get this thing going. You cannot ask fans to travel over and over and over and over. They're currently traveling twice at the most. During this playoff, if it expands to 12 teams, it's going to be either 3 or 4 games, except for the first round on-campus games. Not used, Dexter. If we had expanded playoffs, then all the championship games would be meaningless. Okay. I've gone through and proven that to be false. They're not going to be They're not going to be meaningless if you are earning a first-round bye. And go back through history, 2014 through 2020, and you will see multiple championship game losers who would not make the playoffs. So we got two folks in the live chat. That would be Not You, Dexter, and Christopher, who are against playoffs. Why? I don't know. Go Bucks! Thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. Appreciate that so much, Go Bucks. Mark, was there co-champs in the BCS asking for the chat? I say yes. Were there co-champs during the BCS era? Yes. 2003. 2003, you had LSU and Oklahoma were 1 and 2 in the BCS system. Oklahoma, LSU, and then USC went to the Rose Bowl against Michigan and beat Michigan to finish ranked and voted number 1 by the Associated Press, while the BCS champion went to LSU, who defeated Oklahoma in the BCS championship game. Other than that, that has been the only time that the AP has disagreed with the BCS championship game. Correct? Correct. Yes, that's it. 2004, we had a huge issue with Auburn, Oklahoma, and USC. But go Bucks, thank you so much for that. I believe there's another super chat here. Mr. Prime, good to see you. Should be conference champs only and 1 team per conference for playoff. Okay. So, Mr. Prime, unless we change the conferences in some fashion, you're going to either have, depending on your preference to include the group of 5, you're either going to have 10 conference champions, if we include everyone, all the conference champions, 10 conference champions, or you go with the 5 Power 5 conferences and you've got 5 conference champions. So you've got a difficult playoff format to determine. You're going to have buys, you're going to have to do something, or you're going to have to change the conferences. And to change the conferences, that's no playoff committee can force conferences to add or subtract or programs to leave conferences. So if you're strictly dealing with the playoff and you are the head guru of the playoff committee that gets to decide all this, what do they call themselves? The playoff management committee. Then what are you going to do with that, Mr. Prime? So just figure that out. You got 10 conferences or you've got 5, depending on how you're counting. Or maybe you disregard the new Big 12 that's being formed with the additions of Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF, and you say, well, we've only got 4 conferences, so those are our 4 champions, and then everybody else is left out. You are right, Mike. The first playoff proved that the BCS did not work. What a disaster that was. BCS year number 1, 1998. Tennessee was undefeated despite some really, really shaky performances, most notably against Arkansas and against Syracuse. Some people would consider it a phantom pass interference call that converted a 4th down that allowed them to win at Syracuse. And then also, of course, Clint Sterner's phantom fumble, where he tried to brace himself with the football on the ground and fumbled the ball, and Tennessee recovered to win the game. So anyway, so Tennessee earned it. They were undefeated. But what do you do when you have one undefeated team and then you have Ohio State, Wisconsin, UCLA, Arizona, Florida State, Kansas State, all with 1 loss? Florida State, Kansas State, Arizona, UCLA, Ohio State, Wisconsin. What is that? 6 teams with 1 loss. mess from the very get-go. And the BCS somehow selected the team that had the worst loss. So they selected the team with the worst loss, Florida State, who had lost by 17 points against a 6-5 North Carolina State team. That was the team that was selected by the BCS. The BCS screwed it up just about every year, but most specifically, 1998 was not a great selection. 2000 was screwed up. 01 was screwed up. 03 and 04 were, of course, issues. 03, in 01 and 03, you had teams get obliterated their final week of the season or in the conference championship game and make the BCS championship game. So what a mess, what a mess, what a mess by the BCS. Not a good system. Mike, you are correct. The bowl officials are afraid of becoming obsolete. Christopher is telling us that the playoffs are ridiculous and stupid. So, of course, anyone and everyone has the right to call anything ridiculous and stupid that they want to. But I'm just trying to understand. If anyone has participated in athletics and you want to compete hard, compete fairly, and determine who is the best team, who is the team that is going to earn the championship, what is the best way to do that? The best way to do that is to play the game on the field, on the court. Simple. That's what you do. You play a regular season, and within that regular season, you count the wins, you count the losses, and determine who are the best teams over this course of this regular season. And then when the regular season's over, you have those best teams play in a playoff. Determining anything outside of the stadium, off the field, that's what's ridiculous and idiotic, Chris. That's what is pathetic. No playoff system would be pathetic. If we want to determine a champion, if we just want to play football games, yes. Yo, Herm Edwards' voice. You play to win the game. It's the best I could do. Somebody wants those phone lines open. I can see it. Okay. These people like Not Use Dexter who say that it's not going to be enough if you have 12 teams or 16 teams. Yes, it will be enough. It is enough. In other sports, people aren't complaining that there's not enough playoff teams. You can set a reasonable amount. The amount is not reasonable now because there are not enough spots to include all the conference champions. That's why it's not a sufficient number. But yes, if it was 8, 12, 12's not good because of the buys, but 8, 12, 16, that is sufficient enough. So that is a reasonable number. I actually, if the 12-team format did not include buys, I like everything else about it. I love that it rewards conference champions. I love that part about it. And I love the expanded field. And basically, you would have to have a great season, a really strong season to qualify for the playoffs with 12 teams. But unfortunately, the math doesn't work. Yes, there are certain ways, as D-Rock Irish is pointing out, that you can compare the college basketball tournament in some ways, but in other ways you cannot. So in regards to who gets left out, that there's no comparison there. There's no comparison. The college basketball selection committee selects 68 teams. 68 teams. So for those teams that complain about being left out, that lost 13 and 14 games, they have nothing to complain about. If you cannot make a 68 team field, then you've got nothing to complain about. We are talking about a top 4 out of 130 in which team number 5 or team number 6 does have a legitimate complaint, legitimate gripe, because they have won a conference championship to say we should be in the playoff. We have conference champions being left out. That doesn't exist in college basketball. There are 7th place teams in major conferences making the college basketball tournament. So there's nothing to complain about there. So the teams that get just off the fringe, left out in college basketball, no. College football, different matter. When you're 12-1, you won a conference championship in a major conference and you're left out of the playoff. Yes, you have a gripe. When you're an undefeated team and you get left out of the college football playoff, yes, you have a gripe, legitimately. Not Use Dexter is saying playoffs do not determine championships. They determine who won that particular day. You could say that about every game that's played during the season. So Michigan and Michigan State are playing this Saturday. Michigan could go out there and win 50-0, and I could make the claim like Not Use Dexter. That doesn't prove anything. It only proves that Michigan was better today. Well, if you want to run that ridiculous logic, in quotes, I must put that in quotes because it's not true logic, then we could say everything's irrelevant and nothing means anything, because that's just what happened today. Ohio State beat Akron a couple weeks ago, 59-7. If I wanted to use this logic, I could say, you know what, that game really didn't mean anything, because I don't know that Ohio State is really better than Akron. I think if Akron played Ohio State the next day, they would have beat them 59-7. Akron would have. That's just nonsense, is what that is. All right. If I get 10 people who say that they want to call the show, I'll open up the phone lines. So if you want to call or want other people to call, then please let me know in the live chat. Appreciate the super chat coming in here. Mr. Prime, good to see you. Make the independent conference a Power 6 and add teams, 6 conference champs in the playoffs. Okay. So you're talking about Notre Dame, BYU. You better really bulk that up because that's all you got right now. We don't want UMass and, okay, Mr. Prime, I love what you're trying to do there, but you understand, okay, if we are making you the president of the College Football Playoff Management Committee, your role is simply to build the format for the College Football Playoff. You have no power over all these other schools to tell them what to do. So that's what you're trying to do here. You can't do that. We're living in fantasy land. You cannot go tell Notre Dame what to do and tell all these other schools to form a conference. No. Notre Dame's not going to be in a conference with UMass. So what you're proposing there, first of all, it's not going to happen. You are the College Football Playoff Management Council. You deal with strictly building a playoff format, structuring that, and maintaining that. No, this doesn't work. You have to work with what is currently going on. Figure it out. So I hate to be harsh there, but I'm trying to stick to the real world to a certain extent. We can make up all sorts of things, but what we're dealing with right now is that we have the college football conferences as they currently stand, okay? And now we've got this playoff committee, this management committee, figuring out a playoff format. So we cannot change this over here. It's being changed by those teams, by those schools, by those presidents, by those commissioners, by those conferences, i.e. Texas, Oklahoma moving to the SEC. We're not going to change that. That's fantasy land to make it up the way we want to. We can do that. We can have that kind of conversation, but it's not productive. It's fantasy land. What you need to tell me is how you are building a playoff structure based on our current conference structure. That's not addressing it. You're not going to, that's never going to work. BYU and Notre Dame do not want to be in conferences with Liberty and UMass and New Mexico. So I appreciate the super chat. John wants to call in and do a George impression. Exploring with Ben says it's a call-in show. There's one. TCAP Theater, I want others to call. There's two. Justin says Michigan has not played a ranked team yet. They will in 2 days. Lewis wants to have a big conversation about 1984 BYU. Lewis, I think just for yucks, sometime this offseason, we're going to do a 1984 live stream. That's all we're going to talk about. I will not mention anything else. We will not talk college football currently. I will not mention anything in the live chat that has anything to do with anything else. We are strictly going to talk about 1984. And we will have Chris be here as a special guest. We will do that. Auburn fan wants to call in. That's what, 4? Jay wants to call. That's 5. Sean, I understand your point. I don't agree with it. You could have made the case for any one of those 3 teams, but Ohio State had a 13th data point. They played a top 15 team in a conference championship game. The Big 12, like a bunch of dummies, could not figure out who their champion was. They could not figure out who their champion was. How they could not foresee that at the beginning of the season to say, you know what? We're going into a new era, a playoff. We do not have a championship game. Therefore, we could have a tie for our conference championship. So we need to determine before the season starts how we are breaking that tie. The Big 12 failed to do that. Therefore, the Big 12 did not have a champion. They had co-champions. That screwed them. Plus, they didn't have a championship game nor a 13th data point. And why does everybody focus on Ohio State? I don't know, because Ohio State was 12-1. Oregon was 12-1. Alabama was 12-1. The only team that had a rightful place, without a doubt, without question, in the playoff in 2014 was Florida State. They were undefeated. Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon all had one loss, as did TCU and Baylor. So why Ohio State gets targeted, I don't know. You know why? Because Oregon and Alabama were preseason favorites. So they had kind of already taken up those spots. And again, that's an idiotic, stupid way to look at it. That's the way, again, I'm trying to break people out of this. The preseason said this: Alabama and Oregon were supposed to be really good. So even though they're 12-1 is 12-1, it's better than the other teams 12-1s because we did not expect them to be as good. So Oregon and Alabama kind of made their spots early and kept them. Well, that's again dumb. I don't know if I'm going to go through the explanation right now as to why 6 teams in a playoff do not work. The Biscuit, Mark, would it not be ironic if Notre Dame got stuffed into a conference anyway? That would be good. I want them to. I want everyone to be in a conference. AMAC, if you're talking to me, I did not single out Baylor and TCU as not worthy. You're missing my point. I in no way said that. In no way said that. No. So understand, every year, because we only have a 14 playoff, there are going to be teams that are left out that have just as good a qualifications and credentials and just as good a resume as teams that are included. It's not a playoff, it's an invitational. You have to be invited. The NFL is not inviting teams to its playoff. Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, they do not invite teams to the playoff. Therefore, it's a legitimate playoff. The teams earn the playoff spots. In college football, you have to be invited to play in the tournament. If it were a true playoff, you would earn the playoff spot. Here, you have to be selected. You have to be invited. I did not say that Baylor and TCU were not worthy. I said that there weren't enough spots. And I said, why is Ohio State singled out as being the competition to Baylor and TCU when it should have been, okay, we know Florida State as an undefeated conference champion. They're in. Okay, we've got these 5 teams with 1 loss as conference champions. Who should be selected? Who should be selected? We get to select 3 out of these 5. That's what it came down to. I was pointing out that the Big 12 was stupid and had no forethought when the season started to know we're in a different era. There's going to be a playoff at the end of this season. And the playoff committee has already told us that they value conference championships. We have a conference with no conference championship game. Therefore, we better determine how our conference champion is decided. They didn't do that. Therefore, the Big 12 ended the season and said, we've got co-champions. And that's one of the reasons why the Big 12 was left out. They did not have a single champion. Non-use texter is funny because anytime I bring up the NFL, this individual does not listen to what I have to say about the NFL because I in no way want college football to be like the NFL. If you would listen to my scheduling format and my playoff system, it's not like the NFL. I am only making the one comparison or the one taking one thing from the NFL. And it's not even the NFL. Forget the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NHL, the NBA. Forget even professional sports. Your local park and rec league. What do? They play a season, then they have a tournament. And the tournament's not selected by some kind of committee. The tournament is determined by who had the best records. Any moron can figure this out. Cincinnati deserves it if they win out, but they still might not get it. Well, I will put it this way, Tony. I am completely on board with I do not want to see any teams that go undefeated left out of a playoff, but we don't have enough playoff spots, and Cincinnati's schedule is deplorable. They would really not have earned it except for their undefeated record. So I would want Cincinnati in a perfect world to be included if we had 8 spots, if we had 12 spots, 16 spots, but we don't. We only have 4. And the way things are shaking out currently, they could change. Cincinnati is not going to have anywhere close to the resume that the other teams will have. They have not played a good schedule. It's not their fault. They play in a bad conference. The conference is down this year. And one of the 2 teams that they selected to play non-conference, Indiana, did not turn out to be a good team. And wow, they beat Notre Dame. So Cincinnati is going to carry this around all year. They're basically going to say, and their supporters are going to say, we deserve to be in the playoffs because we beat Notre Dame. While half of America is looking at Notre Dame at the same time and saying Notre Dame's really not that good. So it's so funny how many times I hear this every day that Cincinnati basically earned a playoff spot by beating Notre Dame. And then I hear all sorts of people telling me that Notre Dame's really not that good. And that's Cincinnati's one win. Imagine Georgia or Ohio State or Michigan this weekend winning games against Florida or Penn State or Michigan State and saying, you know what? Season's over. We beat somebody good. That's our resume. That's what we've got to go to the playoff. That's all we need to show anyone. And backers of Cincinnati are doing that. Basically saying, beat Notre Dame, and that's our data point. We beat Notre Dame. The other teams across the country do not have that luxury. They do not have that luxury of just saying we beat one good team. D-Rock Irish, do you think college football playoff expanded playoffs will happen sometime sooner than 24 or 25? I really don't know. I believe so. That would be my guess, is that they could implement this before then. I think you mean the 2024 season, 25 playoffs. Get business credit. Thank you so much for the Super Chat contribution. That's very nice of you. Thank you so much for supporting. Hey, Mark, hope all is well. Looking forward to Ohio State and Penn State. Absolutely. That should be a good one, and we'll be here right after the game. So you've got a lot of options after the game on Saturday night. We're here with the National Call-In Show, of course, as we always are here on the main channel. Also, you could go to the Penn State and the Big Ten channels and check out our Penn State post game with our guys Marty and Tim from Black Shoe Diaries, or you can go join Ori on the Ohio State channel for Ohio State post game. How about that? 3 post game shows going on at the same time. Again, right here with me on the national show, and we've got the Penn State post game and the Ohio State post game. Christopher says, ordinarily, there's really only one team with a claim to the national championship. Wrong. Tony is saying if Ohio State can lose to a Purdue and go to Natty, that's never happened. I don't know what you're talking about there, Tony. Anything can happen at any time. Oregon lost to Stanford this year. Ton of top 25 upsets. It's great for college football. I agree with that. It's great. I love the upsets. I love unpredictability. How many times did I say it during the offseason? I said, really? Can we have something different than Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Clemson, and Oklahoma filling the 4 spots? That 4 of those 5 are going to fill the 4 spots, and we almost know that for sure. Can we have something different? And we are, and it's great. Hey, Seuss, good to see you. Appreciate everyone's support and being here. And let's see, we get a super chat coming in from John Cream. A couple weeks ago, you said a team dominating their schedule would benefit them in the format. Cincinnati has dominated everybody. Okay. All right. Let's see if I can make this clear. Okay. When UCF went undefeated, 2017, 2018, when Cincinnati went undefeated in 2020, I clearly stated, I want those teams to be eligible and competing in a playoff. I don't think that a undefeated team should be left out. They've done everything they possibly can do. Actually, in my heart of hearts, I will say that if a team went undefeated and won every game by 1 point, that's really all it should matter, is the final result on the field, the scoreboard. That's really all that should matter. We shouldn't have to evaluate these teams. We shouldn't be having to constantly evaluate teams. How good are they? Did they really dominate? Oh, they looked kind of weak. Nope. Should just be, boom, playoffs. 12-1, check. 12-1, check. 12-1, check. 12-1, check. Okay, 11-2, check with the conference champ. Those are the teams that make the playoffs. There we go. We should not have to evaluate teams. But we're in this world in which we have to evaluate teams. Okay? We have a limited number of spots. We only have 4 spots. If we had a sufficient number of spots, I would clearly say Cincinnati's winning its games. Put them in the playoff. But they play a freaking weak-ass schedule. It's terrible. I said a couple weeks ago that a team dominating its schedule would benefit from them in your format. Yeah, well, they do. Are you talking about in my rankings? Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, if you're talking about in my format, yeah, my rankings are predicated, number 1, first and foremost, on wins and losses. Wins and losses matter more than anything. But in addition to that, are you dominating? How well are you playing against your opponents? And number 3, who are those opponents? So Cincinnati is not dominated. First of all, the word dominate, boy, people should look that word up. Let's define dominant. Cincinnati outplayed Notre Dame. They had control of the game most of the way. 17-13 with a few minutes left in the game. I'm going to back off from dominant. They were not dominant against Notre Dame. Man, we have watered the word dominant down to like nothing. They outplayed Notre Dame. They played better. They were the better team, clearly. They won 24-13 on the road. They were up 17-13 in the fourth quarter. That is not domination. Georgia beating Arkansas 37-0 and outgaining them 1,000,000 to 0 in yardage. That's domination. That is a dominant performance against a good team. Cincinnati outplayed Notre Dame. They neither dominated them nor did they just barely slip by. Won this classic epic game, last second field goal. No, it wasn't that either. They outplayed Notre Dame. They reasonably outplayed Notre Dame. Decidedly were better. Same with the Indiana game, maybe to a lesser extent. If you watched the Cincinnati-Indiana game, Cincinnati led that game 30-24 with about 6 minutes left. And Indiana drove the ball all the way down the field, had the ball inside the 10-yard line. So they are knocking on the door to take the lead against Cincinnati 31-30. Indiana fumbled. That happens in football. Cincinnati recovered and then tacked on a late touchdown to win 38-24. That, when you are winning 30-24, when you are winning by 6 points with 5 or 6 minutes left in the game, and the other team is 6 or 7 yards away from taking the lead, that is not domination. That is not being dominant. Let's look up the word domination. Dominant. It is got to be the most overused word in sports. Most important, powerful, or influential. That's really not in the way we are looking at it. So anyway, hopefully I explained that clearly. Yes, Cincinnati was a much better team than Notre Dame. They were clearly the better team, I will put it that way, against Notre Dame, and less so against Indiana. We have not had an overwhelming response for a call-in show tonight, so I will continue to answer questions here. John, thank you for the definition there. Commanding, controlling, or prevailing over all others. Daniel does not think that Cincinnati's a top 15 team. And I respect that opinion. It's a difficult decision to make. It really is. Because Cincinnati's doing what they need to do. They're winning games. Sometimes they're dominant. Sometimes they're not. Teams shouldn't have to be dominant all the time against everybody every week to make the playoffs. But they play that kind of schedule. And we just addressed Notre Dame and Indiana. We didn't even address the Navy game. Were they dominant in that game? No. Did they have control of that game for much of the second half? Yes. But they were in a tie game with a few seconds left in the half. Navy was kicking the field goal that would put them up by 3 at halftime. Cincinnati blocked the kick and almost ran it for a touchdown, kicked the game winning or the game lead field goal at halftime to go up 13-10. So they were that close to trailing by 3 at halftime, but they did block a kick and they kicked the game leading field goal 13-10 at halftime. Then they score a couple touchdowns. They're up 27-10. Dominant? No, but in control of the game. Clearly in control of the game. Navy comes back and scores 10 points, scores a touchdown late, kicks the onside kick, gets it, and Navy had the ball with 45 seconds left to go at midfield, trailing 27-20. That is not a dominant performance. When you are having to stop a team with 45 seconds left in the game, when you are leading by 1 score, and they're at midfield, that's not dominating. So there's 3 games in which Cincinnati did not dominate. Did they dominate Murray State? Yes, absolutely. They dominated Great Murray State, and they dominated Miami of Ohio. They did not dominate Notre Dame, Indiana, or Navy. Should I take all, Cheryl? Didn't seem like I got the 10 responses. We got Blake says take calls. If Blake says take calls, we take calls. Blake said it. Sure. Here we go. Give me a second. I may post a video on the Football Power Index because I went through and collected the results of 27 games that were played in the Power 5, all 27 from last week, and how many games were correctly projected by the FPI and which ones were not. So we will probably get into that. The number is 860-499-3332, 860-499-3332.
Thank you for calling Collins Studios host. Enter your 6-digit PIN number. Welcome, host. You are now in the host room and can manage your callers from the Collins Studio web interface.
All right, folks, we're up and running on the phone lines, 860-499-3332. I will put that number on the screen. There we go. On the bottom ticker right there, 860-499-3332. All right, we're lined up already. It's good to see. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's Drew. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Drew. What's going on?
Not too much. So I got to be honest, I actually completely disagree with your take tonight so far.
Okay.
I think Christopher takes it way too far, in my opinion, by saying we should have no playoffs. But I mean, if you like, all right. So when I forget who it was in the live chat, but when they made that comment about the NFL, I think what they were trying to get at is once you start letting 12, 16 plus teams in, it inherently does devalue, in my opinion, the regular season. To me, that's what makes college football unique, is that you have a random Saturday, end of September, early October, where your whole season is on the line. You can really maybe get one mulligan, but that's kind of the point. Would you really want a system where a 3 or 4 loss team could get into the playoffs?
All right. First of all, where do I start? Number one, you are not devaluing the regular season. You would actually add value to the regular season. So this is how. You can go through any regular season in college football. And if you had a expanded playoff, I'm not talking about 32 teams. I'm talking about 16 at the most, but let's say 8. Right now, if you get near the end of the season in college football, let's take the last 2 weekends of the season, you have very few games that have any impact on the playoff. Very few, 4 or 5. okay, instead of having 4 or 5 games that impact, and the rest of them are meaningless. If all you care about is the playoff, which most people, that's all they care about is the playoff, not me, but that's what most people care about is the playoff. So we've got 130 schools. We've got roughly 60 to 65 games every weekend. And the last couple of weekends of the regular season, there are only 4 or 5 games each weekend that are meaningful, and the other 60 games are meaningless toward the playoff. If you had an expanded playoff, you would exponentially open up more meaningful games. You would have, for example, a
meaningful in what sense of the word, though,
that the teams would be able to get into a playoff. I'm not talking about marginal teams.
Okay.
I'm talking about.
All right, then.
I'm talking about, let's say there's 3 weeks left in the season.
What team do you think could win a national championship?
I don't care how many teams could win the national championship. So if for any particular season, if we had God come down and tell us exactly how good these teams were, and he said, you know what, this season only 1 team can win the national championship. This team, Georgia, they are the best and nobody can beat them. Would we shut the season down and say, oh, we're not playing? Or if we only had 3 teams, would we say, well, we can't have a 4-team playoff because we only got 3 teams that can win the national championship. So how do we do that?
Well, sure.
So why not have...
I guess where I would disagree is you made a comment earlier, how could a team that wins a conference with 1 loss be left out of the playoffs? And I'm a fan of a school that very well could do that. If this year Wake Forest wins the ACC and they have a loss, I wouldn't tout and say, oh, we deserve to be in the playoffs. We certainly didn't. We proved that we couldn't hang with the top 2, 3 teams in the country. So why are you playing the games at that point?
How was that proven? How was that proven? You're telling me that if Wake Forest wins every game and loses to North Carolina State by 1 point, then goes and wins the ACC championship game by 5 touchdowns, that they have not earned a playoff spot?
No, I don't think they did.
But somebody else, let's say Oklahoma. So Oklahoma right now is winning all of its games in marginal fashion. Let's say they get tripped up at some point. They do the same thing that Wake Forest has just done, but their name's Oklahoma. And they were given preseason preferential treatment, but they will earn, quote unquote, earn a playoff spot. So you're telling me that they earned it, but Wake Forest did not?
Well, no, but I also think if Oklahoma gets a loss this year, they're not going to get in. I guess where I differ, and I think
they are getting in at this pace.
Maybe. I think
not maybe. They're undefeated. They're getting in at this pace.
No. Okay, my mistake. I meant if they have a loss. I thought that was the hypothetical we were talking about. If Oklahoma has a loss this year, I don't think they get in.
If Oklahoma loses a game, you don't think they'll get in? There's going to be a team that makes the playoffs with a loss. Why does that team deserve it and Wake Forest does not?
Well, I guess in that sense, if it was Oklahoma versus Wake, that would be a much tougher discussion. But I guess this is kind of my whole point in a nutshell, is that part of the whole fun of analyzing this is because there's so many few spots. All right, I'll feed you this. Maybe 6 or 8 makes more sense. I know 6 is a hard number to work with, but there's ways you could potentially do it. But I guess when you start thinking 16 plus teams, it's just, I guess to me, college football would not be the same, because you say at the end of the season on the back end, well, sure, the games are more meaningful, quote unquote. But I think I could argue conversely, the games at the beginning of the season don't really matter. Would the whole country have been mesmerized by A&M beating Alabama? Well, no. Of course we can have a couple losses. It's fine. We'll still get on the playoffs. We'll make our run. It just changes the whole feel of the game, in my opinion.
I understand what you're saying, but if you actually put the results to the format, that's not what is indicated by. And I would love to see a 16-team playoff. If guys didn't have to run into each other and harm themselves. I would love to see a 16-team playoff because I've worked out the formats and the matchups in the playoff would be phenomenal. But because the guys do have to go out there and harm themselves by hitting each other too many times, let's go with an 8-team system. So the reason I like the 8-team system is, number one, when this system was first unveiled for playoff teams, well, it didn't take me a split second of cognitive ability to say this doesn't work because we've got 5 conferences. Why are they only having a 4-team playoff? That doesn't make any sense. So it's going to come down to value judgments. It's going to come down to, why do we have people selecting playoff teams? Why are we holding the sport hostage and placing all the authority into the hands of 13 people that none of us could name right now? So all those people control college football, and who is deemed worthy of a playoff spot by this almighty committee. That's how we want the sport to be run? Is that fair? 13 people go into a room and determine who makes the playoffs. That's crazy to me.
No, that's a solid argument for sure. I can't get all right, yeah. We might just have to disagree on this one. And like I said, 8 isn't even that, but I think, Mark, it's 16 or 32 teams. It is becoming a mini NFL at that point, in my opinion. I mean, you obviously disagree, but that's how I feel.
Well, let me say this. Okay, I could take a million examples. This one comes to mind. In 2011, Wisconsin went 11-2, and they won the Big Ten championship. They went to the Rose Bowl. Okay, this is pre-playoff. The 2 games that Wisconsin lost that season was to Ohio State and to Michigan State, both on legit Hail Marys. Last play of the game, 50-yard line, throw into the end zone, ball gets tipped, touchdown, Wisconsin loses. During that season, Wisconsin, nobody outside the Big Ten proved that they could defeat Wisconsin. They won 4 out of conference games. And therefore, if we had a playoff system, I would want that team to be in the playoff. They won a conference championship in probably the second best conference in America, arguably the best conference in America. Nobody outside the conference proved that they could beat Wisconsin. They lost on 2 Hail Mary passes. Why that team cannot play in a playoff, I think that's reasonable. And when you look at, well, I'll make one more point. If you're looking at any major sport at the professional level, you have anywhere from 30 to 50% of the league makes the playoffs. In college football, we have 4 out of 130. Even if we had 8 out of 130, that is 6%. That is the cream of the crop. 6% of the sport would make the playoffs.
Yeah, but that's not the fairest analogy. I hear what you're saying, and you are right, but you would have to. All right, so for example, say a major sport like the NBA, I honestly couldn't even tell you off the top of my head how many teams are in the league.
16 out of 32 make the playoffs. Yeah. Half the league makes the playoffs.
So you are, yes, but what I'm saying is the parity of the league is such that it's not a fair analogy to compare all 32 NBA teams to every college football team. Because Rice and Alabama, there's a pretty big gulf.
Sure.
You know what I mean? So you are right, but it wouldn't be 6%, but I do hear what you're saying.
Well, let's say it's 6 out of 60. But it's still, we do have, technically speaking, 130 teams playing major college football. But I do understand your point. Your point is certainly valid. And this is one of the reasons why, if I was running the playoffs, we would address scheduling first, because scheduling has the biggest impact on our evaluation of teams. When Baylor does not play a ranked non-conference opponent since 1997, it's been 24 years since Baylor played a ranked team out of conference. There's something wrong with scheduling. The scheduling needs to be equitable and fair for everyone. So I would address scheduling first, because that's, again, the major component that skews our observation and evaluation of these teams. And then the second thing I would address would be the group of 5. I would either formally include them or formally exclude them. I would stop teasing them by saying, you're included in our consideration when you're really not. Or you have to climb mountains and go through all sorts of adversity to make it and be considered. You're either at the table or you're not at the table, one or the other. You're formally included with 1 spot out of 8, or we're telling you go play your own playoff.
I agree with that. And I will say, in fairness to you, because I might have missed this earlier, because I've only really been tuning in for about the last month and a half. But if I was just going to say Mark Rogers is now the dictator of college football, and you could implement all the scheduling and other things you wanted to do, then I think I would be much more comfortable with an 8 or 16 game playoff. I just think as the college football landscape is now, I guess maybe this is pessimistic, and like I kind of sound like a hypocrite, especially as a Wake fan, because you do, and it's like especially my mindset with the whole Oregon, Ohio State thing, because I do believe settling things on the field matters. But I just see a world where it's going to be the same 2 to 4 teams anyway, and we're just going to watch a bunch of blowouts.
Well, I understand, but that's not the fault of the system if a few teams are going to dominate the sport. And a lot of people are projecting, I don't really have an opinion myself. I can see their point that if we do open up and expand the playoff, that some of those fringe schools, Penn State, Notre Dame, Auburn, will have a better shot at recruiting because they can say, we can show you where we would have made an expanded playoff field for the last 7 years. And the same schools wouldn't be drawing in the very top talent to dominate the sport. Hopefully what we're seeing this year will continue and we'll see more unpredictability. I just don't like a world in which we look down at Wake Forest and say, you did all this, but we really don't think you're any good. So you have to do more than they have to do, because we know that they have great recruiting rankings and they're a name brand. So they don't have to do as much as you have to do.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We can transit. I appreciate the lively discussion.
Absolutely.
But I love the show, man. But I guess it won't switch. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I want to be fair to the point that you originally made, and I think it's a valid point. You do not want to be watching Alabama and LSU play the second week of November thinking the loser of this game doesn't really care because they're going to be in the playoff anyway.
Precisely, because if I'm being honest, Mark, I've and maybe you even made this point. I watch a lot of college football shit on YouTube, but I look at it as they're already playoff games. They're just built into the season. Like, I know they're not literally, but to me, what makes this weekend so exciting is they are de facto. There's a lot of essentially de facto playoff games. So I guess to your point, we're just swapping one for the other.
Well, I think this is one of the reasons why the committee, it appears the initial model that they put out with the 12 teams, which I love everything that they've put in there, except 12 teams doesn't work to me. I'll explain that at another time, and I've explained that many times, but I don't want to go into it right now. Is that it awards the conference championship games. Therefore, teams would not intentionally blow conference championship games, because then they would have to play an extra game and they would not get the automatic bye if you did not win your conference championship game. The other way I would stick it to any particular team that would be sandbagging a late season game. Let's say Alabama's undefeated. They're playing Auburn. It's obviously an enormous game. Typically, it's a rivalry. It's one of the greatest in college football, college shoot in sports. That if that's why I would make first round games played on campus. So if Alabama wants to blow that game, fine. But if you want to travel to Madison, Wisconsin in December and play a playoff game, it's fine with me. Play your backups against Auburn and intentionally lose. That's fine with me. If you want to go to Madison, Wisconsin and play a playoff game in December, that's all well and good. Fine. Go ahead.
Yeah, definitely. All right. One thing, keeping with a similar theme, but just switch so we don't have to just keep on talking about this. But I think Notre Dame ultimately will need to join the conference. Obviously, I'm biased. I think the ACC is a much better cultural fit, but I saw some people talking in the chat about either Big Ten or ACC. I was wondering if you had any thoughts generally, if you think Notre Dame ultimately will bite the bullet and join, and if so, where do you think they're landing?
I don't think there's any question if Notre Dame joins a conference, they're going to join the ACC. They've already made that commitment. They've made the full commitment in every other sport, and they've made the partial commitment in football. I can't see them yanking out completely and then going somewhere in some other direction. I think they already have a relationship with the ACC, and they would just continue that. From a football standpoint, historically, their fit is in the Big Ten, in my view, because number one, geographically, they're in the heart of the Big Ten. Secondly, they have long-standing rivalries with Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue that were played for years and years and years and years and years. And it just doesn't Notre Dame fit the Big Ten from a, again, historical standpoint, just from the look of it, the feel of it, the brand, all of it just fits in place. For Notre Dame to be playing Wake Forest and Virginia Tech on a yearly basis, it just doesn't, to me, have that. It's just not a football fit. But they've already made that commitment, so I think that would be the direction that they would go.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because I actually agree with what you said in the sense that when it comes to solely football, they totally are a Big Ten fit. But I think if you look at just, if you know, at the end of the day, Notre Dame's still an academic institution. So
yeah,
you look at the fact they're private, they have a religious affiliation, stuff like that. You know, I could not crapping on the Big Ten academically, but you know, when I at least academically or the religious affiliation, you think more about a Duke or a Wake or a BC. To me, that's more like the cultural fit. But when it's strictly football, it has to be Big Ten. So that's why I always think they're a very interesting school. And I also hate them, but that's neither here nor there.
Good stuff, Drew. I appreciate the call.
Definitely, man. Let's go deep, get our win against Duke, and I'll talk to you soon.
There you go. Have a good night.
Yep. Talk to you later.
All right. Good stuff from Drew. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Chris.
Hey, Chris. What's going on?
Oh, nothing. I just was going to ask you again, Mark. This is something I guess that kind of runs into my brain a little bit. I have a mental disorder. I don't know if you knew that, but so I have to take medication to balance myself out. But that's neither here nor there. But it just, I really don't think a playoff does any good at all. And I don't really want to get into all the whys and hows because I've already heard them all before. If it was such a good format, I think we'd be talking about the FCS a lot more. That's what they do as a playoff, and you can say, oh, well, the FCS, they had to do that because they weren't admitted at the first place or whatever the reason was. But really, if it was such a better thing, I think we'd be having the FCS teams at the topic of our conversation more than we do. Not that it's bad for them. I mean, maybe they like the format better, but that's kind of where I think the parallel is. I mean, if it was really so much better, I don't think we'd be having FCS teams moving into the FBS and saying sayonara to whatever conference they were in. In fact, I think Connecticut left the FCS to come back to the FBS, but I know that's a private decision. I understand that, but if they were getting such a great deal in the FCS, I don't, better deal or whatever it would be, maybe better television. I don't know. I know they're smaller. I know the enrollment's smaller. I know they probably don't. They probably, regardless of what they used, even if they didn't use the playoff, they probably wouldn't get nearly as much exposure. But, I think the reason the Bulls do as well as they do is I think people do care about the Bulls. And I kind of feel like it's not really fair to the Bulls to say, I mean, you call them, I don't know if it's you, it might not be you. Well, meaningless bowl games. Well, who's calling them meaningless? I'm not calling them meaningless. I've always heard that argument. Well, oh yeah, BYU played in a meaningless bowl game. I guess they did win it, but it was a meaningless bowl game. Well, it wasn't meaningless to them. So, who's making that decision as far as, and it's not just that. I guess if people didn't like bowls, that'd be a good reason to, but I think people do like bowls. I've never met anybody that didn't like a bowl. Personally, I like the bowls. I've actually only been to a few playoff games, and they're okay. Don't get me wrong. Where I live, it's a smaller community, like less than 10,000 people, and they were sellouts. The playoff games were sellouts, but that's because they didn't have the option of a bowl. And I don't know whether the bowl would have attracted anybody or not. But so maybe for the smaller, maybe it doesn't fit well within the larger. I don't know. I don't agree that it's a good idea to get rid of the bowls and replace it with a playoff. That was Dan Wetzel's idea, and I can't stand Dan Wetzel. I hate Dan Wetzel, and so I really don't want anybody taking Dan Wetzel's side. I hate Dan Wetzel, and if you like Dan Wetzel, I guess that's okay, but I can't stand him, and I don't want him getting his way. Is what it's up with me. I don't like Dan Wetzel. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm trying to determine where you stand in regards to you enjoy the bowl games, you like the bowl games, you don't like playoffs, and you believe the bowl games should be kept, which I think that every college football fan that I know of, I love the bowl games. I love bowl season. There is no question, though, that they are becoming less popular, and there's no question that they are being deemed less meaningful because players are determining that they're less meaningful by opting out of them. We had a Cotton Bowl game, the Cotton Bowl. We're not talking about like the Camellia Bowl. We're talking about the Cotton Bowl. Okay. That was
which year?
Kind of a joke last year. The game was a joke. Florida had so many players not play in that game that Dan Mullen basically threw in the towel and didn't prepare his team. His team was unprepared. He basically detached himself from the team to say that wasn't even our team playing in the bowl game, and it became a circus, and it was a 55-20 annihilation, and it was really embarrassing. And that wasn't the Cotton Bowl's fault. That wasn't anybody's fault.
No,
really anybody's fault, because the players have that option to leave, and at that point that they can't be penalized in any such way because they've already committed themselves to the NFL. They can't be penalized in any way by being kicked out of school or anything else. They don't care at that point. So we're just in this predicament where the perceived value of these bowl games is becoming less and less and less and less. And then it becomes less and less and less as players sit out and do not participate in the bowl games.
Was it that way before we had a playoff? Was that the problem?
Well, no, it's not been a problem.
Okay. Well, at any rate, I'm kind of roughly familiar with what you're talking about. I knew that it was Oklahoma and Florida. I remember hearing about it, and I remember kind of how lopsided it was. And I can see maybe why certain people weren't interested in it. I don't know that I was all that interested in it myself, but I think that's kind of a personal choice a person makes, whether they want to play in a bowl game, though. I don't know. I really don't know how that really lends itself to the idea that playoffs are a better way to, I guess a person might take that opinion, but, I didn't know it was in the Cotton Bowl. I actually kind of thought the Cotton Bowl was Notre Dame versus Clemson. Anyway, I'm a little confused, but, I thought that one did okay, but.
Well, that was a playoff game. Notre Dame and Clemson played in a Cotton Bowl each season before in a playoff game. So in 2018. So Chris, if I could
the title games aren't
state this.
Go ahead.
The reason people want playoffs is the whole reason. There are two basic reasons why these games are played. It's entertainment. Yeah. It's entertainment. Sure. That's what it is. Okay. It's entertainment for all of us.
I understand that.
And then on the other hand, it's to determine the champion. People want to know who's the champion. If they just played a bunch of games and at the end of the year, there were no rankings, there were no playoffs, there was no nothing, they just kind of ended. Well, there needs to be a culmination to say, we want the best teams to be playing each other to determine, because that's the ultimate entertainment, is when you see the best play the best and see who wins, to say, hey, they're the champion. The only way you can do that is in a playoff.
Well, okay. At any rate, I did a little bit of research on it, and I'm not like an authority on any of it. But my impression was that the semifinals do really well, and the national championship doesn't do all that great. I mean, the semifinals do really well as far as, and then when it comes around to the title game, people are just kind of tired, and they might watch it, but it's not. The BCS, I think, actually did better as far as the championship game went, as far as drawing an audience.
Wait a minute.
I mean, I don't know. You don't have to believe it if you don't.
You're telling me that. So I worked in the television industry for a long time and worked for the
that
company,
title game that was in California. Go ahead.
And worked for the company for 19 years that broadcast all the bowl games and all the playoff games and the championship games. So I know a little bit about this. So
yeah,
you're telling me that the semifinal games outrate the championship game.
All I know is the one they had
That's
in California at Levi Stadium. Well, I don't know. You might want to look into it. The one between.
I don't need to look into it. I used to get the ratings every day at work. I know that
I'm telling you, Mark,
semifinal games do not outrate the championship game in college football. And even if they did, that's no reason not to have a championship game. What do? Have two semifinal games and then say, oh, we'll just, everybody can guess as to who would win the championship game. I'm not understanding your point as to why not to play a championship game.
Well, I guess my point is it's not like people, by the time the championship game comes around, everybody's super excited about it. They're kind of like, well, I guess there's one more game we can watch. It's not like you make it sound like everybody's all, if they're not. I mean, yeah, they're interested, but not any more interested than they would be with BCS. I mean, I know that's,
well, the BCS was a championship game. I mean,
yeah, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. I mean, it's like bait and switch. It's like now we got a different.
It was a horrible way to determine a championship game, but it was a championship game. It was the BCS championship game.
Well, I don't know if it was a horrible way to do it, but
sure it was.
I mean, I think it worked.
Well, how did it work?
You say 1998. The only problem I see with 1998 is it didn't include Tulane. That's the only problem I see with 1998.
It didn't include what?
You know. The only problem I see with 1998 was it didn't include Tulane, you know, and then there's probably a good reason why it didn't include Tulane. So really, I don't agree with you at all about 1998. I think the right team won it, you know. So I think if you're going to make it on 1998, I'm going to tell you I think it was.
I'm going to make it about every year. You're telling me that a team should have advanced to the BCS championship game that lost its conference championship game 35-7. That is what the BCS computers and the polls spit out in 2003. They had Oklahoma advance to the BCS championship game after they lost their conference championship game by 4 touchdowns.
Actually, what they advanced to was the Sugar Bowl because there wasn't a BCS championship game. But
there was a BCS championship game. There was a BCS from 1998. From 1998 through 2013, there was a BCS championship game. From 1998 through 2005, let me finish. From 1998 through 2005, that BCS championship game was played in a bowl game. After 2006, from 06 through 13, it was played as a separate BCS championship game. But there was still a BCS championship game starting in 1998.
It was the Sugar Bowl. But regardless of that, I don't think that was the wrong thing to do. I actually kind of think that was the right thing to do.
The right thing to do to advance a team that lost 35-7 in a conference championship game to then get beat in a BCS championship game.
Yeah. Well, they advanced to the Sugar Bowl. That allowed
they advanced to the
BCS
championship game.
They advanced to the Sugar Bowl, but which included the BCS title as a part of the deal, but. They played LSU in the Sugar Bowl and they lost 21-14, I believe.
Yes.
But anyway, yeah, the other season I just want to bring up, you brought up 2011. I don't know if you're aware of this. It's just something I discovered. I mean, it's not really relevant to this conversation, but, you know, Houston was in the running for a BCS spot, not for the championship. I understand that. Had they beaten Southern Mississippi, they wouldn't have gone to the national championship. But as controversial as that year was, had it been up to me, like we say, well, let's put somebody as czar. I'm not the czar, obviously. But if they had beaten Southern Mississippi as bad as Southern Mississippi actually beat Houston, if it had been up to me, which I know it wasn't, they were like 9 or 10. Don't get me wrong. But if it had been up to me, if Houston had beaten Southern Mississippi, I would have put in Houston together with LSU in the title game if it had been up to me, instead of Alabama. Now, you might say that's stupid, crazy, whatever. But that's why I like the BCS. I mean, that would have given Houston incentive. Instead, what it was someone or whoever left for Texas A&M. Southern Mississippi beat Houston really bad. And we got Alabama versus LSU. But even with that, I mean, I don't see that as a problem. That worked out fine.
You're telling
Alabama.
You're telling me that you support the BCS. You also are telling me that in 2011 that you would have wanted LSU and Houston in the BCS championship game, but you understand that the BCS system would not have elevated Houston to the championship game.
I'm saying if it had been up to me. I'm not saying I know that BCS wouldn't have. They would have been in the BCS though. They would have. I understand what you're telling me, but my point is, you put Houston in the BCS no matter where it is. Maybe it's not the title game. There's still an incentive to try to win, and if you don't, which is what we have now, I guess. If you don't, then there's no incentive to win, in my opinion. I mean, they wouldn't have gone to a playoff probably, at least not they were like 9th or 10th. They probably wouldn't have been in. I mean, they might have made it, but it's kind of, I'm just saying, Mark, I think the BCS was so much better than what we have now. I don't even think it's close. I mean, you can have your opinion. I don't think Tennessee laughed back into any championship in '98. I think they won a national championship.
Of course they did.
Tulane deserved an opportunity.
I never stated in any way that Tennessee backed into a national championship. They went undefeated.
LSU didn't win it. Miami, Florida didn't deserve it in 2001. LSU didn't deserve it in 2003. I guess, what was it? USC didn't deserve it in 2004. I think they all deserved it. I know they were ineligible, but they deserved it.
I have no issue with the team that won the BCS championship game. We have tons of issues with what teams made the championship games and which teams were left out. There are every year during the BCS era teams that had resumes that were just as good as teams that were selected for the BCS championship. I could sit here for 5 hours and detail it. 2001, Nebraska did not even win its division, let alone its conference, and went to the BCS championship game. That's a horrible decision by the BCS. Atrocious. Awful.
Well,
when you lose
I don't know about that.
on Thanksgiving weekend and give up 62 points and you don't win your division, you don't win your conference, and you get selected to go to the national championship game only to get completely annihilated and embarrassed, that's a horrible system. And it happened over and over and over. Texas,
they actually played pretty decent in the second half.
They didn't. They were annihilated. They got crushed. They were down 31-0. Who cares what they did in the second half? It was irrelevant. Didn't matter. They were getting killed. Miami had its third stringers in the game. They could have scored 60 points if they wanted to. The BCS is a piece of hot garbage that elevated teams to championship games that shouldn't have been there, where other teams had just as much right to be there. The BCS is also the system that had Florida State in a national championship game in 2000, in which Miami beat Florida State head-to-head, and they had the same record. I could grab a 5-year-old from a kindergarten class and say, these two teams play 12 games. They each won 11 out of 12. This team A beat Team B. Which team should go to the championship game? And the 5-year-old could tell me which team should go to the championship game. But the BCS couldn't do that.
Florida State the defending? Weren't they the defending national champions?
Who cares if you're defending anything? It's a separate season. In 2008, the BCS had Oklahoma in the national championship game in a season in which they had the same record as Texas. Texas beat them head-to-head, but what did the BCS spit out? Oklahoma goes to the national championship game. Wrong.
Texas Tech was involved with that too, though.
Wrong.
Yes.
Bad.
That's not wrong. That's
horrible.
Not wrong. Texas, it was
horrible.
There were three teams.
Awful.
3 teams tied for the division title.
Terrible.
No, that was
pathetic.
That worked out. That was
did not work out.
That year
did
worked
not
out
work
perfect.
out. Did not work out. Never worked out. Worked out perfectly. The Texas is saying, oh, there's a team playing in the national championship game that we beat and we have the same record. Wrong. That Florida, that Miami and Washington, that Miami and Washington, Yeah, but Texas Tech was not involved.
Washington lost to Miami, Florida.
Texas Tech was
Right,
not
Washington lost to Miami, Florida.
absolutely, absolutely. So there are systems that could be put in play. I did not say that Miami should have been playing in the national championship in 2000. I'm saying that Florida State should not have been. People don't even bring up 2013. People don't even bring up 2013. Auburn played in the national championship game. Michigan State had the same credentials as Auburn. They had the same record.
Auburn had to beat Missouri.
They won
a
Big Ten championship.
They had to beat Missouri.
Michigan State had to beat Ohio State, which was much higher ranked than Missouri, had a better record than Missouri. Why did Michigan State not play in the BCS championship game? Because the BCS championship game was insufficient, because it's not a playoff.
Sorry,
Anything
Mark,
else,
I don't agree
Chris?
with you. No, sir.
All right. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you. All right. Next up here at the Voice of College Football, who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, this is Homegrown Cowboy in chat. Boy, you guys got, I tell you what, there's some hardcore fans in your chat here. This is something else.
That's good.
I tell you
All
what,
right.
this is great.
Love it.
This is great.
I was too fired up myself to even see what they're talking about right now.
Well, they're excited. You know, we're all excited, and you know, it's football season. We don't want to see it go, and you know, everybody's just having a good time, no matter what team you go for. You know, it's great. But anyways, the reason why I'm calling is I'm an Alabama fan, and you know, my question is the USC coaching, okay? The coaching job, it's still vacant, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Could it be economics involved with the decisions of the coaching job there? Because I've never seen USC having to wait this long to find a coach.
Well,
I mean,
I'm guessing that USC
that
is waiting
possible?
until the conclusion of the college football season. I know that there are some candidates out there, of course, already that aren't currently coaching, but I would think that they want it to be known to recruits that, hey, we are no longer employing Clay Helton. We're going in a different direction. And they want to see, you know, as well as I do, the day after the college football season, there are going to be like 8 coaches fired. And that will set off domino effects all over the place. So I think USC is just waiting for that, unless there's another candidate in mind that's available before that, like a Bob Stoops, somebody like that.
Bob Stoops. So, okay, let me give you a quick scenario real quick.
Sure.
Let's look at this. We have Nick Saban, who's the top paid coach, right? $9.5 million, I think what it is.
Yes.
Second, I think, is Coach O at basically somewhere around $9 million, and then you have the head coach of Ohio State, Day, who's what 8 point? No, wait a minute. Is it Day or is it Debo from Clemson? I'm trying to think here.
Well,
I think it's Clemson, sitting at 8.5.
Okay.
But my point is that okay, these coaches, you know, they're the top paid coaches in a different part of the country, and it would take a lot of money, in my opinion. I mean, you know, we're talking about economics here, for them to somebody with a caliber of a good coach to be at USC. I mean, if somebody asked me if I was on the same level as, let's say, Ryan Day, and USC wanted me to come out there and coach, I mean, I would have to ask at least $10 million. I mean, a 3-bedroom house out there costs what, $800,000? I mean, I know this sounds kind of irrelevant, but when you really look into it, who would want to go to USC and coach when these other guys are banking?
I don't think it's irrelevant what you're bringing up. College football fans don't care. They don't care what these guys are being paid. They don't have to sign the check, but it makes total sense. Hey,
Right.
if my 5 million can buy me this in South Carolina, then why am I going to USC to make 5 million? Because it can't come anywhere close to it. Yeah, that there has to be an adjustment made for the cost of living.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I'm just wondering. I mean, if if I'm a great caliber type coach, I'm going to have to go out there and seriously make some money if they want me to be there. And I just don't see that happen. I see USC coming up with a mediocre coach, whatnot, until the economics get going. Because I mean, it just doesn't look good out there. I don't even know what the head coach of UCLA is. Do you?
Do I know who he is?
You know? Yes, sir.
Yes, it's Chip Kelly. If I didn't know every college football coach in the country, I shouldn't be on here. So yes, I know who coaches UCLA. Chip Kelly.
I get that, and I've been listening to you for a while, so I understand that. But okay, well, I just I was just wondering about that because the economics just doesn't add up. I mean, if you want somebody to go out there to USC, it sounds like you got to really pay them some big dollar money. Probably more than saving.
Yeah. So what do you make sense? Well, everything that you're proposing makes sense from a cost of living standpoint, but that doesn't seem to be brought up because the coaches in those locations, Los Angeles being the main one, does not make as much money as those other coaches make. So they just have to take the hit.
Unless you want to get notoriety. Now, yeah, I mean, if you're willing to go to USC and you're just a average name mediocre coach, they offer you $4 million. Sure, go ahead and take it and try to get your name out there. That's the only thing I can think of, and USC is going to just stay mediocre. So, but I was thinking to go on there and I'll shut up and hang up or whatever. But I felt like this is kind of have something to do with the LSU head coaching situation. I don't know. I just they already know. In my opinion, they already know who the head coach is going to be at LSU. That's the reason why they're dragging Coach O along. And who's going to be left over is going to go to USC. Is that possible? I don't know. It's possible, but we'll see.
If USC is considering Ed Ogeron as their next head coach, then they really don't know how all this should work. I don't know why. None of us know. It's just it's really interesting though. It's really interesting how all this falls in place. But after this year, it's going to be interesting to see all the coaching jobs that are left over, and we'll see what happens. But this has been a wacky year, I'll tell you that. So yeah, it's been fun.
Anyways, Mark, I'm gonna let you go, Mark, and I enjoy the chat in there, and I enjoy listening to your show. And no matter who you root for, shoot, man, we're all just having fun here. All right.
That's right. I appreciate the call. You have a good night.
You too. Talk to you later. Bye.
All right, let's keep it rolling here at the Voice of College Football. Who's next on the line?
Mr. Mark, this is Blake Barber.
Hey, Blake.
I live in Arkansas, and I'm from Iowa.
Yeah, how you doing tonight?
All pretty good. Making some pork and curried potatoes and drinking some whiskey.
Nice.
But anyway, I wanted to kind of transcend this whole playoff conversation versus BCS and past histories and stuff like that. I want to introduce an idea to you and see if you can use your knowledge and historical expertise and try to hatch something to transcend this whole argument and move into the future as far as college athletics goes.
Okay.
I'm an idea guy, and I've developed an idea that I submitted to Flow Wrestling about the NCAA wrestling schedules Scheduling always has seemed to be a sticking point as far as, rankings and, bowl games and all that kind of stuff. And I think the idea that I gave as far as wrestling goes could also be implemented in other college athletics. Generally speaking, the idea is ranking preseason 1 through whatever number it may be, and then pool play and reseed after every pool play is done. Basically, if you wanted to do it in quarters, it would be like the pool would be 1 and 128 and 64 and 65. And then after every pool play is done, you could even do it in fifths. You could do 1 and 125 and 63 and whatever other ranking. I haven't worked everything out. This is kind of just me going off the cuff here, but basically you would reseed and do a new pool every single time pool play has continued or has been conducted, and it would kind of get rid of you would basically get rid of conferences. You would basically get rid of any scheduling problems that ADs would have. And you would also introduce something that is done in soccer called relegation. Basically, if you finish in the bottom, you could move it back and forth as far as the numbers go. But if you finish in the bottom of the Division 1, bottom 4, then you move down to Division 2. And if you finish in the top 4 of Division 2, then you move up to Division 1. And it would basically make it so that all the scheduling is even keel. You would play a very even amount of opponents, and it would basically be a tournament format, but not. It would be a tournament format, but not with the underlying problems that you have with elimination. What are your thoughts? What do you have to add? What are your questions?
So let me get this straight. So we've got 130 teams currently in college football. So you would divide them into pools that would roughly be, not that we have to work out the math perfectly, but they would be roughly how large?
Hold on. I have one question. I always get this confused. FCS is Division 1, right?
No. It's the former Division 1 AA. FB, as in boy, is the top 130 schools.
Right. Okay. Go ahead.
So we've got 130 teams. And again, we don't have to work out the math perfectly. So roughly how many pools would we have of how many teams each?
Well, if you wanted to do it in pools of 4, it would be 128 for FBS or Division 1.
So that's
however you want it to.
128 divided by 4 is roughly 32. So we've got 32 pools of 4 teams. So in any given pool, let's say it's Pool A, Pool 1, we've got 4 teams. They play the first 4 weeks of the college football season. And at the conclusion of that...
No, it'd be first 3 weeks if it was...
they play the other 3 teams. Correct. Okay. So they play the first 3 weeks of the season. So there would be some collection of teams with whatever records, 1-2, 0-3, 2-1, etc., 3-0. So out of those 4 teams, again, they could come out all with 1-2 and 2-1 records, or you could have 3-0 and 0-3 records. You would take the top. What would you do after that? You would take the 3-0 teams and put them in a pool, or what would you do?
Yeah, you would fractally work it down. So you have 32 pools, right? The initial stage, everybody would play 3 rounds or 3 games, 128 teams. Anybody that went undefeated would automatically get moved to the front. And you would then seat it in sections. So it would be in quartiles then, or sixth or eighth. It doesn't really matter. I haven't worked out the math as far as football goes. I worked it out as far as wrestling went, which was, I can't remember if I did it on 78 or 80, but that's basically how many Division One wrestling teams there were. But wrestling doesn't matter. But the math can be worked out in the end. But you would basically reseed it. So then you would say, okay, so we had 128 teams to start out with. Now we've got, then you do it in halves. So we take the top 64 teams for the second round, and then we reseed it again, right? And you could do it on criteria. Okay, first is your record. Then you could do it on point differential. There could be any number of different ways that you could apply criteria to then reseed. But the idea, the broad overview of this is that it would eliminate scheduling. It would eliminate everything that we run into as problems. And it would basically be an elimination series to then determine a national champion.
Okay. So,
and if you had a problem, a subpar performance, let's say, or maybe you beat a team by less than you should have beat them, in an early round, you can always move your way back up by outperforming, the opponents that you play in a second or a third round.
So the first issue I see is that there will be games in week 3 of the college football season. So the last week of pool play for the first pool. And we will not know who's playing whom the next week. Therefore, there's all sorts of travel issues and fan accommodations, stadium accommodations that are unknown a week prior to the game.
You can work it out yeah, that's fine. You could work it out in fifths, where you would do 125 teams in 5 teams in each pool and 4 games, where you would reseed 3 different times.
Well, regardless of how many pools you have and how many teams you divide it into, you're always going to have that transition from one pool to the next pool. Therefore, you're not going to know who's playing whom the next week, and that's a problem.
I'm not sure that I really see that as a problem.
Why is that? You don't think that's a problem that in week 5 of the college football season, there are games being played and nobody knows who's playing the next week. Therefore, people can't make television deals, can't be struck in regards to. So you understand that there is a working mechanism between ESPN and Fox in particular and others that determine what games are slotted in what time slots, and all that's predetermined 2 weeks in advance. So they would have to figure out all that on the fly the Sunday prior to the next Saturday's games, plus people that wanted to attend the games, buy tickets, fly to the games, wouldn't even know who their team's playing until 6 days prior to the game.
Well, you're kind of thinking this with this in an old perspective with a BCS, playoff.
This is a real life perspective.
If you seeded everything, I understand that you're applying some things that are real life. If we went to a system like this and you had pool play and you had 5 teams per pool, let's say, and it was 125 teams, and you did one pool, and it was 4 weeks, 4 games to complete the pool play, you could do a bye week in between, right? And everything could be worked out, and every team could have one game at home, one game on the road, one game at home, one game on the road.
So right now,
a week in between, and
so right now there's a maximum of 2 bye weeks for any college football team, and typically 1 week. You're proposing a number of bye weeks. The season would be too long.
2 bye weeks.
Okay, 2 bye weeks. All right. The biggest issue I see in all this, and I'm sure if I thought about it, I could come up with a ton. I've already come up with one in regards to not having a schedule for the next week. But
Well, as far as scheduling and what ESPN and what ABC and NBC does, I mean, again, you're thinking about it very in a constrained way.
They run the sport.
Probably,
The television networks run the sport.
and the sport wouldn't change financially from one system to the next. Matter of fact, I think that it would be a whole lot more exciting and increasingly so through the weeks as it goes on.
It would be confusing. I think that's an
right.
issue. I think people would be confused
right.
by it. Not everyone's wrapped up in college football. Most people just want to know, okay, my team's Georgia and we play in the SEC and we usually play these teams and we need to win more games than them to win the SEC championship. They don't want to be involved in this constant tracking of pool play. I think that would be a disaster just from the standpoint of fan interest and understanding of what's going on. The other thing is that the very essence of college football is tradition and rivalries and regionalization. And Ohio State, its fans want to play Michigan. They want to play Michigan State and Penn State. Florida fans want to play Florida State. They want to play Georgia. They have rivalries that are long-standing for generations with those schools. They don't want some haphazard schedule.
Are you about to say that the idea and the excitement around March Madness doesn't exist?
That's the conclusion to the season. That's the conclusion of the season.
A whole season of nothing but March Madness. And everything would be relative. There would always be competitive games because at the end of every pool play, you would reseed. There's always something to fight for. There's no dead play. There's no point not needing to be scored. There's no week that is unimportant.
So what happens to the team that loses every game? They're not playing unimportant games?
What do you mean, the team that loses every game?
There's going to be a team that loses every game.
Right. Yeah. So
or nearly every game. 1 in 12, 1 in 11.
Yeah. What I mentioned is the relegation. It's something that is prevalent in soccer. If you finish at the bottom, whatever, 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't really matter the number. But if you finish at the bottom, then you go down to the league below you. And if you finish at the top of the league, like the FCS, if you finish in the top 2 of the FCS, let's say, you move up to FBS. And if you finish the bottom 2 of the FBS, you move down to the FCS for the following season.
Well, the only issue I see with that right off the top of my head is that generally the better teams and with the most money and the most facilities and all that are obviously winning the games, but there are exceptions in particular years where Alabama 15 years ago or a little bit beyond that went 3-9. We could see a Nebraska team go 3-9, and no one in college football would want to see them relegated. There's too much attention, too much popularity, too much money involved to relegate them to some kind of lower level of football just because they had a bad season or a bad part of a season.
So I guess I don't understand what you're saying. You're implying that the fans of one college should dictate a whole season and a whole scheduling and a whole process of the whole of the NCAA. I mean, if a program is terrible, if they get a bad attitude, they get a bad coach, they're corrupt, maybe they have financial problems, criminal problems, corruption problems, whatever it may be that contribute to a bad season, then their fan interest and tradition should supersede the success of the sport.
No, not at all. I'm just saying it's a factor. I'm not saying it should supersede anything. I'm just saying it's a factor.
It's a factor, but it's not predominant. I wouldn't say or imagine.
I don't know about that. So it's an interesting idea. I don't personally like it, but I'm not saying it doesn't have any merit to it. Just because I don't like it, I'm not the king of college football. I'm just one voice. So I don't in particular like it because I think it tears up the fabric of the sport. The fabric of the sport, what makes college football unique are the traditions and rivalries and the regionalization of the sport.
So it seems to be that your passion for the regionalization and the tradition, it's kind of a duality. It also holds us back where we end up with conversations about, well, yeah, but UCF, they didn't really get a chance because, I mean, they went undefeated, but, you know, they never got a chance to go to the BCS Bowl.
No,
they didn't get to play any of the big boys, but, you know, they always talk about, yeah, we were. And so at the end of the season, what happens if Cincinnati goes undefeated and they're on the outside looking in because, you know, Georgia went undefeated and Ohio State ended up winning theirs, and Oklahoma, you know, just barely squeaked out an undefeated season by winning by single digits every week. And, you know, this is a even playing field. It's a way to not only in competition, but also in recruiting. I mean, you know, a young kid that is a big star recruit, he might want to go to a program that's on the up and coming the middle, you know, a 64, a 65 ranked team, and to make a difference. And he could be the difference maker for the whole program. If it's a good environment, if it's a good coach, if it's a good work ethic, if they're producing, they're developing, it's an equalizer. The way that I'm talking about seeding this, yeah, you're going to have to let go of some of the things that were a part of college sports, college football particularly, in the past. But it's a whole new world. It's a whole different way of looking at things and competing and developing and honing in on an actual champion that actually played a wide array of teams and styles and even regions. When you talk about regions and traditions, what are we talking about here? Traditions of winning? Or are we just talking about, oh, well, yeah, I mean, Wisconsin plays Minnesota and they've got, you know, Paul Bunyan's axe, and that's a tradition. Bull. I mean, what does that matter?
It matters to the people that it matters to the people that watch college football. So what I'm saying is that
we could move up.
What I'm saying is, okay, so you've explained the system. Let me finish. Let me take this part of the conversation, please. What I'm basically saying is, you cannot dismiss what I have stated as being what's important to fan bases in college football. You can explain it away to put it into some kind of objective process and system that may work from a competitive and mathematical standpoint, but that doesn't address the issues that it would cause by its implementation. And I've already stated all those, and people don't want them. So, and you're also not understanding that I have built a scheduling system. I'm not saying it's perfect or not flawed, but I've built a logical scheduling system and playoff system that addresses what you just stated involving Cincinnati and UCF, et cetera. So those can be addressed without tearing up rivalries and regionalization of the sport. I'm going to move on to some other calls. We appreciate it. I would suggest
every week, Mark.
What?
Your rivalry is every single week. You always have something to play for. It's always significant.
Yeah, if
not only the
if
win,
you tell Florida fans, if you tell Florida fans that they're suddenly playing Oregon State this week and that's their rival, just because you tell them that's their rival, just because they're playing a game, that doesn't make them a rival. So I appreciate the phone call. It sounds like you need to propose this system to somebody that has a lot more power than I do.
Most definitely.
Because if it certainly came to be, I'd still cover the sport, and I'd cover it in a different way, and I'm sure I would applaud it in certain ways, and I'd be critical of it in certain ways.
Well, if you'll allow me, just about 10 seconds in closing here, the idea that, you know, we have all these controversies year in, year out, this is kind of the decider. It puts those all to bed.
Very good. Well, thank you.
You know, we have all this controversy.
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good night. All right. Let's take our last two. We'll take 3 calls. Here we go. Welcome to the voice of college football. Who's on line? 3 calls, everyone. Nobody ever listens to when I say 3 last calls, because then there's about 7. Yeah. Welcome in. What's going on?
To the man that gives college football its voice. That sounded almost akin to the Da Vinci Code there. I think that you were running down
I don't think we want to confuse people. People would be confused, and they don't want to try to figure things out. They just want to be entertained and watch college football and follow their team.
I hear you. I wanted to give you a call, Mark, because first of all, I wanted to say, I think after that Penn State-Illinois game last week, are we both eating a little bit of crow right now?
About how good Penn State is?
Yeah, about how good Penn State is, or about how good we thought Penn State was. Let's just put it that way.
Well, yeah, I'm going to say that, sure, they're not as good as we thought they were. There are also things that are fluid that change throughout the course of a college football season, and one of them would be injuries, health.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there's no doubt that Sean Clifford was playing injured that game, Mark. But you know, I listened to you. You had a Penn State live show, right?
Yes.
Okay. I caught like I think it was the tail end of it the other night. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think one of your Penn State guys thought that they could probably or should have been able to win that game with even the backup quarterback. I mean, considering that Illinois is probably the worst team in the Big Ten.
Yes, they should. Penn State should beat Illinois with a backup quarterback at home. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that was an ugly one to watch. I did want to say this. I mean, and I know that, you know, things can be different week to week. I actually think Penn State could still, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave Ohio State a tough game this week, or at least a good game, maybe possibly for 3 quarters. I mean, I was listening to a few of the Buckeye analysts, you know, talk this week. And I do think that Penn State has a few players that, you know, probably would be playing at Ohio State, especially on the defensive side of the ball. And I know we've talked about how good Dotson is at wide receiver, you know, and he's definitely an Ohio State kind of caliber type wide receiver. And, you know, certainly if they had a healthy Sean Clifford, I would expect a lot closer game this week. But, you know, maybe from a defensive standpoint, I know they have a strong secondary. I think, Mark, you said you felt still feel they have the best defense in the Big Ten. Is that right?
That Penn State is the best defense in the Big Ten?
Yes.
Well, I certainly thought at one point in the season that they had one of the 2 best. I've always liked Wisconsin's defense. And right now I would rank them. I would like to see Michigan play some better competition, but I would rank them right now fully healthy. I would say either Wisconsin or Penn State is the best defense in the Big Ten, and the other one is second, and then Michigan and Iowa are in the running.
Yeah, I would say this. I would tend to agree with you. I think Michigan's probably, you know, within maybe that second, third slot. I think you can make a case for them. Although, again, until they get to, you know, run up against a real passing game and their corners can get really tested, I don't know just how good they are. And that kind of leads me to this week in that game, Mark. I saw your conversation with our good buddy, Mr. Dave. And now, has he expressed, you know, pretty much that Cade McNamara is pretty much a game manager type quarterback? Is that the feeling that you get from him?
Well, yeah, I don't think there's really any other way to look at it. I know that I've seen various statistics served up from the likes of Pro Football Focus that not only highlight how many passes he misses, but how many passes he does not see.
That's true. That's true. I mean, how many? Well, that was that Harbaugh quote about him leaving some throws out there and probably missing some wide open receivers is basically the case that's being made, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, now is Dace of the opinion that they would be that much better with J.J. McCarthy? Because I know that he had mentioned early in the year if they suffered some early losses that Harbaugh might go to McCarthy, and just, kind of build for the future, and that's the quarterback of the future, so we got to play him. Is he of the feeling that they would be that much better with him at quarterback?
Well, I think we generally both think, if I can speak for him, I've heard everything for the most part that you have. I haven't had any one-on-one personal conversations with Steve in a while. That I don't know that JJ McCarthy has a lower, like if he's going to be inserted in the lineup, can anybody really imagine that he's going to play worse than Cade McNamara? But we know that he has a lot. He's just a much more athletic player and with a bigger arm. So the ceiling's much higher. The floor is probably the same. He's been tested in games. They've done a nice job, and I think this has been a good approach to get him into meaningful games, taking meaningful snaps since the first game of the season to get him prepared and have him not fall prey to the situation we saw Penn State in at Iowa. But the problem is that we're not working a video game. And therefore, we don't know how the players in the huddle respond to Cade McNamara versus J.J. McCarthy. And I've not heard any I've heard overwhelming positives about leadership from Cade McNamara, but I haven't heard any negatives. So I think you got to be careful with sending a certain message to your team when you're 7-0 and your quarterback is protecting the football and producing a decent amount of points that you would yank him. I don't know if that's good for the team.
Well, could this be Harbaugh's, Trevor, I'm not saying that these quarterbacks are on this level, but could this be Dabo, akin to Dabo's 2018 move, the Lawrence over Kelly Bryant move?
Well, yeah, I've brought that up a number of times. I think there are some parallels there, but I think Dabo Swinney also knew that he was going to win the ACC championship regardless. So he was preparing a player of generational talent for a playoff run. Right.
Yeah, because right now, I heard one Buckeye analyst, I don't know if you brought this up today, he said, one of the Buckeye analysts says Michigan kind of reminds me of a rich man's Wisconsin. Basically the strong running game, the good front seven on defense, game manager type quarterback. I know what you thought about that analogy.
Well, I would say that they're a rich man's Wisconsin only in the recruiting rankings. I don't know what they're doing any different otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's what he meant, is that they're playing the same style that a traditional Wisconsin would play, but with higher recruits.
Yeah, and even with this Michigan team being 7-0, I give them all due credit for being 7-0, but I think their 7-0 has more to do with the two teams that I would have anticipated and did predict them to lose to at this point in the season, Wisconsin and Washington, not being anywhere close, especially Washington, to the teams that I expected them to be. Michigan's no better or worse than I expected them to be. They've just fallen into this 7-0 because those two teams did not meet expectations. So I'm still waiting to really be proven by Michigan to be anything other than a 9-3 team.
I tend to agree with you. I don't think that either one of these teams, my gut feeling is this is pretty close to a 50-50 game. Is that your gut feeling too, Mark?
No, I really think that Michigan's a better team. Not by a whole lot. I'm more in the 60-40 camp, even on the road.
Okay. So you were of the view of if anybody's going to make a statement in this game, win, let's say a 31-7, win by a 3-score type margin, it's going to be them.
Yes.
Obviously, then, right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay. See, that would be my one thing that would perk my interest as an Ohio State fan. I would say that if they go in and make a statement and do a 31-7, something like that, then maybe we can have a conversation, show some confidence in the passing game, and really pull away. Then that would perk my a little bit as an Ohio State fan. But if they go in and win, the old school 17-14, 2017 kind of Big Ten kind of way, which is what this game's got a feeling of, I guess I'm less concerned as an Ohio State fan, which is what I'm tending to think this game is going to be. I don't know if that's your thought too, Mark.
Well, that's understandable. I would say the same thing. Obviously, the more convincing the win, the more likely that that Michigan can contend with Ohio State as opposed to just getting by.
Last point I want to make, Mark, and I'd be remiss if, as a longtime Ohio State fan, I don't get to the Buckeyes here. But I do think that this Ohio State offense is fairly historic. Now, again, I think you're going to have to see it against the better competition and then continue. But I just looking at the personnel and not seeing very many holes on this offense. Loving the offensive line, loving the receivers, the running backs, the tight end, and the quarterback playing on the level that he's playing at. I was talking about this with a friend of mine, fellow Big Ten fan. I want to throw this out to you. You've obviously covered college football for a long period of time, Mark. Just looking at the history of the Big Ten, as long as you've watched the Big Ten, how many offenses, in particular in recent memory, let's say in the last 25, 30 years, outside of Ohio State, have you seen that have been really well-balanced offenses where they've had it pretty much in all areas? They've had the strong quarterback, they've had the tailback, the receivers, really good up front on the offensive line. Outside of Ohio State, how many complete offenses have you seen like that in the Big Ten, let's say in the last 25, 30 years?
Well, the first one that comes to mind is Kerry Collins' Penn State team in 1994. So there's the first one.
That'd be my choice. Yeah.
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 Other than that, well, let's see. I would say that the team that beat, now I'm not really running through what their issues were that year and losing a few games, but once they got to Columbus in 2000, Michigan had Drew Henson, who had a remarkable day against Ohio State, like 20 of 23, something like that. And he was just throwing howitzers all over the place. And of course, he had NFL receivers and he had Anthony Thomas at running back. I thought that was a pretty first-rate offense that comes to mind.
Yeah. Anthony Thomas at running back. I think they had David Terrell or some pretty good wide receivers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Marquise Walker, David Terrell.
Right.
See, when you phrase it like that, there aren't enough teams in the Big Ten that recruit at the level that Ohio State or anywhere close to that would be able to fill in that. Drew Brees obviously carried an offense and he made his receivers look better than they are because none of them made the NFL except for a cup of coffee. And they didn't have any kind of running game of note. So,
that's why I tried to take it back like 30 years.
Yeah.
Mark. I tried to take it back as far as I could.
Every team we would think of other than Michigan and Penn State were so deficient in other ways. Minnesota brought through a lot of really good running backs under Glenn Mason, like Marion Barber and Lawrence Maroney and Russell. Can't think of his first name off the top of my head. But of course, the quarterback play, the receivers.
Yeah.
It would be those Penn State and Michigan teams.
I'll throw out a couple of recent vintage. I would say Michigan in 06 had a fairly well-balanced offense. I know they were known for their defense that year, but Penny at quarterback, Hart at running back, Mario Manningham, Breston were NFL wide receivers, Jake Long on the offensive line. They had a lot of NFL guys on that team. I would say Wisconsin, the only time they had a quarterback, which was the year of Russell Wilson in 11. I think they had a pretty strong running game. I think Nick Toon at wide receiver was pretty good, if I'm not mistaken. I forget who I think it was Monty Ball was the running back that year. It was pretty good. Not one of the upper end Wisconsin running backs, but he was very good that year. And Wisconsin lost 3 heartbreakers that year, all of them by 7 points or less. 2 of them on Hail Mary passes to Michigan State, and the only good win the Buckeyes had in 2011 was that Braxton Miller heaved to Devin Smith. And then, I would say like a recent vintage, the last team to win the Big Ten. I would say those 10 that wasn't Ohio State, I should say. The Penn State, the McSorley Barkley team, Gesicki at tight end. I think they had Godwin on that one team in 16 would probably be the offenses of like recent vintage that I would say would be well balanced with quarterback, receivers, and running back. I don't know what your thoughts are on those, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. You could throw those teams in there as well. All right, David.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate the call.
A pleasure, my friend. I'll talk to you this weekend. You take care of yourself.
That sounds good. Thank you so much, David.
Bye-bye.
All right. Let's go to our final 2 here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Hey, Mark, it's the real MVP. How you doing?
The real MVP. What's going on?
Well, there's a lot of great games this weekend that I would like to discuss.
All right. What you got?
Well, I'm not going to go to the top because not everybody's going to be discussing those games the following days. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State. So I'm going to go a tier below it. What about Florida State versus Clemson? Could Clemson be 4-4 after this week?
Well, they could be, sure. Sure, you got a team in Clemson that is got to be hugely disappointed about its season, which you've got a team in Florida State that nobody on this roster's won anything. So, and then they get off to the horrible start, but they've got a little mojo going. So they're headed in the other direction from an attitude standpoint, at least. And Clemson's severely beat up.
Yeah, Clemson lost their best running back, their primary back the other day. So he's out for the game. And he's been scoring all Clemson's points. So I know the line's at 10, but can Clemson score 10 points? That's a legitimate question. I don't know. I mean,
they haven't scored 20 in the conference.
No, here's a question for you, Mark. There are 2 teams in the FBS who have not scored 20 points against a Power 5 opponent. Who are those 2 teams?
Clemson.
That's one.
20 points against the Power 5. Well, Kansas is not. Well, no, they did against Oklahoma last week, 23.
Yep.
I've got to say that it's got to be. Did Vandy? No, they lost to Stanford. I don't think they scored 20 in that game. I'm going to say, wait a minute, Vandy. No, they scored 20 against South Carolina. Didn't score 20 points. Did not score 20 points. Duke. Let's see. Duke. I'm not going through every team's schedule. Okay. Wait a minute. Kansas.
Okay.
You said Kansas?
No. The answer, I meant Duke scored more than 20 against Kansas. But the answer is Arizona.
Arizona. Okay.
That's how bad Clemson's offense has been.
Yep.
That's amazing. Another game I would like to briefly touch on for a little bit is Louisville plays NC State this weekend.
Yep.
NC State lost Isaiah Moore, one of the best linebackers at NC State, but I think Louisville can pull. I actually like Louisville in the game. I think Louisville's going to win outright, and I think Wake Forest is basically going to have the Atlantic wrapped up.
Okay.
unless somehow they lose to North Carolina, Clemson, and Boston College, which would give Louisville. If Louisville wins out, they would win it, but that's not going to happen. So, I mean, for the ACC being down this year, Wake Forest, Pittsburgh, I would watch that game.
I will watch that game. And the ACC championship game has meant very little to me for quite some time because it's not been a good game. First couple games that Clemson won were pretty decent games against North Carolina and Virginia Tech. But since, 17, 18, 19, and 20, the last four have been lousy.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a good game. Fresno State plays San Diego State this week.
Yeah.
San Diego State's a 1-point favorite. Big Mountain West implications. I mean, San Diego State, they were underdogs last week to the Air Force, but they pulled away with a 10-point victory. I guess you can call it an upset. So, Fresno State, I think they're good, but they lost to Hawaii, but they had 7 turnovers. I don't even know how you have that many turnovers.
Oh. Maryland did against Iowa.
Yeah, but that's Iowa's defense. Iowa has an elite defense. Hawaii? Can anybody name a single player that plays for Hawaii? That makes no sense.
Somebody somewhere.
That'll be a good game. Somebody somewhere. Somebody in Hawaii.
Somebody in Hawaii. Somebody related to the team. All right, man. Well, we're going to keep it moving here and take our last call. But we'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah, it's good talking to you, Mark.
Thanks to Real MVP.
I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Appreciate that.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. We got 2 calls on the line. I keep saying 2 more calls, and it's like 9 o'clock, and this show's been going on forever. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
Mark, you disappoint me. I thought I was going to be the last caller. It's Exploring with Ben.
I think I'm going to make you the last caller, but I feel bad for whomever's waiting. That's the problem. How you doing tonight?
Well, I can't post my chat text then saying, "Yay, I'm the last caller. Good night, everyone."
Well, it's going to be more exciting. It's going to be more exciting when that eventually happens, though. That can stay on the bucket list. You know, you could keep that on your goal sheet.
The drama.
Yes. It'll be more, you'll be able to cherish it even more when it finally happens.
That is true. I've called you from Trinidad, I've called you from North Dakota, I've called you from Houston, I've called you from everywhere at this point. So I didn't want to take much of your time at all. You know, I agree. BCS and the playoffs both have problems. Both could use improvements, as you said, expansion, human elements, all that crap. So, but yeah, there's a bunch of games this weekend, and it's not just the top ones. So, like your Real MVP just called and said, listed several really good games that, you know what, that could in the future implicate or, influence playoffs because those teams could play those Power Fives and beat them. So, those are important games because those improves those teams' rankings, popularity, and all that stuff. So those are very important games besides the Ohio Penn State, which is going to be a good game. Got it. But there are other games that really are important.
Absolutely. I'm always looking at other games thinking, man, I wish I could see that game and that game and that game and that game. At noon on Saturday, I am definitely going to have one eyeball on Michigan State, and the other eyeball is going to be on Iowa, Wisconsin. But at the same time, Texas and Baylor, Miami and Pitt, those are 2 games I would like to see in addition to. So I'd like to see 4 games for sure, just at noon.
Pitt should blow out Miami, but yeah. The Iowa game, that should be a good one. Actually, I will not be watching football this weekend. I will be back in Houston tomorrow, and I will be driving through Louisiana up to Mississippi. And unfortunately, I will not be watching, so I'll just be recording my Ducks game. to watch by Sunday night when I get back.
Okay.
But they should hopefully blow out Colorado. Should, hopefully. We'll see. No heart attack this week, please. I'm tired of this.
Well, Ben, I appreciate the super chat here. Anything else on your mind?
No, that's I agree with most of everything you said. Every system has problems, but tradition sometimes I think in this day and age, if you're not like actually going to that school, like if you're just a fan of that school, like a lot of people are, rivalries sometimes or traditions sometimes get overrated because you didn't go to school maybe, and so you're just following it, but the rivalries really get to you. But some schools do have too many rivalries. I agree with that. I see that. Oregon has like 4 now. I mean, mainly the Oregon Beavers or the Oregon State Beavers, then Washington, and then like Stanford, USC is like 3 and 4 intermixed. Like sometimes you get too many rivalries. So I agree with some other people who comment on that, where it's not just your traditional rivalry, like Bama LSU maybe, or Bama Tennessee. But sometimes you get too many rivalries. But that's still what makes the sport great, is because you never know what can happen during those games. Those games. Did I just say gays? Those games. I'm drinking, so you know what, Mark? You have a great night, but
all right,
rivalries.
Ben. Appreciate it. Have a good one. All right, and last up tonight here at the Voice of College Football, we appreciate Ben so much, and again his super chat that of course I always read. Cheap tonight, but rivalries are everything in college football. All right, who's up?
Hey, what's going on, Mark? I guess I'm the last call.
You are the last caller.
I will not live up to the hype. I'm telling you that right now.
Okay. Well, I'd like to know who's not living up to the hype.
No, I said my last call. Me living up to the last call hype. I will not.
Well, like I said, I would like to know who's not living up to it.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Me not living my questions, not living up to it. So, but here it is. I'm thinking about the USC LSU job.
Yes.
And I think they both want the same guy at the top of their list, have the same guy. And I believe let me know what you think. I believe it's James Franklin. And I believe James Franklin goes to USC because USC is a better job. Your thoughts?
Well, USC is a better job because historically it's a better job and because it's easier to win there now because of the lack of competition in the conference. That's what would make it a better job. I don't know that it's a better job. I know that LSU is hell-bent on winning and cares about football. So depending on your criteria of what a good job is and what a great job is, that we could have that argument all night between LSU and USC. Historical, USC. Ability to win based on the competition in the conference, USC. Resources, facility, rabid fan base, LSU. James Franklin, yeah, he's the guy that's been brought up, especially with the USC job. I tend to think that LSU is going to go in some other direction. I've got nothing to base that on. I'm not in the boardroom discussing who are quality coaches are qualified for the job or what they're looking for besides a guy that's going to come in and win football games. But yeah, James Franklin's the guy that's because of his credentials is the guy that's at the top of the list. Both lists.
Absolutely. I guess, I haven't understood why wouldn't more coaches go for the USC job when you have a greater chance of winning? You can get the recruiting of LSU the same or close to the same amount of quality of player, and your competition's easier. It's much easier to play Oregon State than to play Auburn. Why haven't why hasn't USC gotten that top tier coach
Well, USC did have top tier coaches going back to Pete Carroll and Lane Kiffin. Understand that most top tier coaches were not top tier coaches prior to the job that they currently have. Nick Saban was, but was Pete Carroll a top tier coach before he made himself a top tier coach? Was David Shaw a top tier coach before he made himself a top tier coach? You know what I'm saying? So,
yeah. But at programs like USC, I think when they're that historic, when they're that big, when they're that powerful, I mean, obviously the Pete Carroll example is great, but once you got to go after the biggest names,
but the point I'm making
can't go after
is if you go all the way back 50 years to John McKay, every coach at USC was really nothing before he was at USC. John McKay, John Robinson, what was he doing before USC? Ted Tollner, Larry Smith, John Robinson came back, Pete Carroll, Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, Ed Ogeron. What did those guys do before USC? Was USC hiring the best coach in the country? Were they bringing in Nick Saban or Urban Meyer to coach? Were they at the time bringing in Lou Holtz or Bobby Bowden to become the head coach? No. None of those coaches were famous coaches before they coached at USC. None of them.
No, you're exactly right, Mark. I think the program, though, right now needs a big name coach. They need to be relevant again. I mean, there's no reason why that team is not back, in that top level of
sure.
Of
and I understand what
football.
you're saying. I think it's more important to hire the right guy than to hire a famous guy. Chip Kelly got hired by UCLA,
right.
And if he doesn't step it up, he's going to get fired. So making a splash, hiring a big name coach only goes so far. If you're 1-3 after a month of play with that big name coach, nobody cares that you've got a big name coach anymore because the offseason hype's over. As opposed to if you hire a no-name coach who's really good and you go 10-2 the first year, well, then that no-name coach now suddenly has a name and his team's 10-2 at USC.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a great explanation, Mark. But I guess I'll leave you with this. If you're USC, who do you pick? Who do you think is that guy?
If I'm USC, I would rather have Luke Fickell or Matt Campbell over James Franklin. I think James Franklin's a good coach, but I like the other two better.
You think Campbell's because you believe he can build that program?
Yeah, look at what he did at Iowa State.
Why hasn't he been able to get a big time job more recently? He's always a finalist. He's rumored with Florida back in the past. He's rumored with every big name, but no one pulls the trigger and grabs him. Is there a reason for that?
Well, I don't know that he's been up for that many jobs since he's elevated Iowa State to this point. When you think back, so if you're talking about at the point that Florida hired Dan Mullen, that was prior to the 2018 season. So Matt Campbell had not accomplished anything close to what he's accomplished at this point. I think he's going to get, if Matt Campbell wants a job somewhere else, he's going to get a job somewhere else. Thanks so much for the call, man.
Right,
I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Mark.
Call back anytime.
All right, go Trojans. Hey, thanks. Bye.
Okay, I'm going to take this call very briefly, and this has to be the last call of the night. We were supposed to be working on our last call like 3 calls ago. Welcome, Voice of College Football. Who's on the line?
It's Exploited with Ben. I got my fucking text. Oh, sorry. I got my text in, Mark. Sorry. I'm so happy now.
All right. I have no idea who that was, but they're doing their best to get me kicked off YouTube. So thank you for that, knucklehead. All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Welcome to the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you locking in every way possible. Please like the video, share the videos out on social media, subscribe right here. We've got content coming your way. We're going to talk a little Cincinnati first thing in the morning. So check out that video on the Bearcats resume, and we will see you next time.